Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lindsay Wilson. Lindsay Wilson was a kind-hearted and empathetic person who wanted to love and be loved. Her primary mistake was failing to recognize her partner's true nature in time. As time passed, she struggled to escape from their codependent relationship. Lindsay's story began when she discovered she was pregnant at 17. Raised in a loving family, she wasn't emotionally unprepared, but her boyfriend's abandonment scared her. Lindsay was aware that motherhood would bring physical and financial challenges. She was relieved to meet Mitchell, who seemed like a gentleman, attentive and caring, and didn't shy away from her despite her pregnancy. However, his true nature would eventually be exposed, leading to devastating consequences. Mitchell fell in love with Lindsay at first sight and wanted to spend his life with her, raising her child as his own. He worked hard to provide for her, even taking extra hours to ensure she wanted for nothing. However, their 5-week-old relationship shocked their parents, who felt they were rushing into marriage. Despite their doubts, they got married in August 1995, surrounded by Lindsay's family and only a few of Mitchell's relatives. Lindsay's family noticed that Mitchell was overly sweet and polite, but they kept their misgivings to themselves. The newlyweds had a dispute on their wedding night, which left a bad impression on Lindsay's relatives. Mitchell's behavior became increasingly controlling and violent. Lindsay sought psychological support and reported the abuse, but her husband would answer the door and phone calls, preventing her from contacting her social worker. The social worker, concerned for Lindsay's safety, reported her missing in February 1999. The police visited the address but were unable to speak with Lindsay, and Mitchell claimed she had left him for another man. The search for Lindsay began, and her relatives reported that they last saw her on December 11th, appearing happy and healthy. Her mother had tried to reach her on December 24th, but was told by Mitchell that she had left with friends, accused of infidelity. Detectives were puzzled by the fact that no one had expressed concern about Lindsay's well-being for 2 months. It was clear that Mitchell had isolated her from the outside world, including her close relatives. Although they had previously struggled to communicate with her, it was possible for Lindsay to go unnoticed for a while. However, this didn't mean her family wasn't worried. The news of her disappearance was alarming to everyone. They all described Lindsay as a modest person who didn't drink, and Mitchell had restricted her contact with friends and acquaintances. There were many inconsistencies in Mitchell's story, which contradicted his character profile and raised the investigators' suspicions. It seemed unlikely that Mitchell would simply let his wife go, and that Lindsay would leave her children with a tyrannical husband. The situation merited a thorough investigation, so the police spoke with all of Lindsay's acquaintances, trying to find anyone who had seen her after the family gathering. They questioned neighbors and requested surveillance footage from the residential complex where they lived. Unfortunately, all footage had been deleted by the time Lindsay's disappearance was reported. However, another date was discovered when she was last seen in person, on December 15th at the local post office, sending several letters and postcards. Her older sister also admitted that they met that day, despite Mitchell's disapproval. The sisters had tea together, and during their brief conversation, Lindsay slipped a note into her sister's hand, asking her to read it later. The sister put the note in her purse and forgot about it in the whirlwind of days. Regrettably, she couldn't find it later, and its contents remain unknown. After that day, no one saw Lindsay again for several months. Investigators tried to hold on to any information they could, suspecting that she was no longer alive due to her prolonged absence. They couldn't charge Mitchell without sufficient grounds and evidence, but the more they learned about their life history, the stronger their suspicions grew. They had married shortly after their wedding and moved away from their parents, renting an apartment in Southport. Later, Lindsay gave birth to a daughter named Robin. The only shadow over the new baby's joy was her stepfather's volatile temper. After moving, the young wife fully experienced her husband's unstable moods. One moment, he could be joking and laughing. The next, he became unbalanced and aggressive. She tried to maintain a fragile peace at home, but didn't realize how completely she had submitted to his will. He controlled every step she took and caused a scene whenever she failed to hear the phone or answer a call. Loud arguments were often followed by passionate reconciliations, with Mitchell kneeling, begging for forgiveness, and professing his love. For a while, it seemed that peace had returned to the family, but then the cycle would start again. Conflict, reconciliation, repetition. Lindsay began to lose recognition of the man she loved. She often told her relatives about what was happening, and they advised her to return home and end her suffering. It was hard for the young woman to admit her mistake. In one interview, the Wilsons mentioned that she always lived with thoughts of the past, each time her husband assured her he would change and everything would be fine. As a loving wife, she wanted to believe him and waited for him to return to his former self, gentle and caring. Meanwhile, Mitchell increasingly tightened his grip and control, forbidding his wife to go out alone in the evenings and eventually restricting her from being anywhere without him. He was jealous of her every move, yet he himself was seen in dubious liaisons. Lindsay confided in her older sister about her suspicions of her husband Mitchell's infidelity. She shared an incident where a woman came to their home looking for him and was shocked to learn he was married. This led to an argument that escalated into physical violence. From then on, physical abuse became a regular part of their life as Mitchell sought to control Lindsay and maintain his reputation. Mitchell began to isolate Lindsay from her neighbors, friends, and family, despite her efforts to secretly maintain contact with them. Lindsay stayed in the marriage because Mitchell provided a comfortable life, financially supporting her and their child. However, when she discovered she was pregnant again, she knew she didn't want more children and decided to terminate the pregnancy. When Mitchell found out, he became enraged, hurling insults and physically intimidating her. Lindsay packed her things, took her child, and returned to her parents' home. Her family was relieved, and she proceeded with the pregnancy termination as planned. Over time, she began to miss Mitchell, who frequently called and begged her to come back. Mitchell eventually convinced Lindsay to give him another chance, and initially, everything seemed to go well. However, his severe anger outbursts continued, and he destroyed their apartment, leading to them being evicted. They had to take out a large loan and move to a more modest apartment. Their relationship continued to deteriorate, with Mitchell frequently leaving home for days or weeks at a time. Lindsay grew accustomed to his behavior, but eventually filed for divorce and returned to her parents' home. She realized she couldn't cope with the separation on her own and reached out to a local charity that assisted women in difficult situations. With their help, Lindsay found subsidized housing in another city and took measures to distance herself from Mitchell, including obtaining a restraining order. She began to rebuild her life, started a journal, and sought therapy. Despite her precautions, Mitchell discovered her phone number and began calling her, demanding to see their son. Lindsay, who had been feeling lonely, reunited with Mitchell despite her relatives' and friends' disapproval. They began living together again, which shocked those who cared about her. However, Mitchell remained unpopular with them, and they eventually stopped communicating with Lindsay, believing she had returned to an abusive relationship. This decision ultimately proved fatal. Initially, Mitchell was cooperative during the investigation into Lindsay's disappearance. However, as the case gained media attention, he shifted his focus and became a public figure, inviting journalists into his home. His numerous media appearances seemed insincere, with some viewers noticing a smirk on his face. Lindsay's parents and detectives viewed Mitchell as the prime suspect, but the lack of direct evidence hindered their efforts. Searches were conducted at their home and throughout the area, but Mitchell continued to appear in the media, even declaring that Lindsay's family would one day apologize for their suspicions. On the eve of the holiday season, Mitchell sent a postcard to the lead investigator with a pack of hair dye, mocking the detective and displaying his arrogance. The investigation team responded by hinting that Mitchell was not who he claimed to be, tarnishing his reputation. In February 2000, it was discovered that Mitchell had been forging Lindsay's signature to receive social benefits, which indirectly implicated him in her disappearance. Despite the financial motive, Mitchell's popularity worked in his favor, and many supporters argued that he, as a single father, deserved financial assistance. These circumstances hindered the detectives' ability to bring charges, but they eventually accused Mitchell of fraud. He was found guilty and sentenced to community service. However, Mitchell's popularity began to wane as the forgery of his missing wife's signature appeared suspicious. The number of angry comments increased, and Mitchell eventually snapped, blaming the media for intruding into his personal life. The case might have remained unsolved had it not been for a chance discovery on June 1, 2000, when a park-goer noticed their dog acting strangely near a roller coaster. Human remains were uncovered, and forensic examination confirmed they belonged to Lindsay Key. This breakthrough revitalized the investigation, making it clear that Lindsay was a victim of a brutal crime. The focus shifted to finding the perpetrator, and on June 7, Mitchell was brought in for questioning. After 36 hours of intermittent interrogation, the suspect broke down and confessed to dismembering and murdering Lindsay on December 15, 1998. Mitchell told authorities that Lindsay had informed him of her decision to file for divorce earlier that day, which enraged him and led him to attack and strangle her in front of their children. He then hid her lifeless body in their bedroom, using a gap under the door to conceal any odors. Realizing he needed help to dispose of the body, he enlisted the assistance of his brother Elliot, a butcher, who was initially hesitant but eventually persuaded. While the children played in the next room, Mitchell and Elliot dismembered Lindsay's body and later dispersed her remains across the city. During his confession, Mitchell showed no remorse or empathy, instead seeming proud of his actions and stating that without his confession, they would never have proven his guilt. The next day, he led authorities to the other locations where he had hidden her limbs, although her head and one hand were never recovered. Forensic comparison confirmed that the remains were indeed Lindsay, leaving no doubt about Mitchell's guilt. The trial of the Key brothers took place in January 2001, with Mitchell being found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 17 years. A court-appointed psychiatrist noted that Mitchell showed signs of being a narcissist with sadistic tendencies. His brother Elliot received a 7-year sentence for his role in concealing the crime. Lindsay's children were taken in by her maternal grandparents, who gave them their surname. 3 months after the sentence was handed down, another tragedy struck the Wilson family when one of Lindsay's older brothers, unable to cope with the shock, took his own life in the attic of their family home. As of 2017, Mitchell Key has been eligible for parole, but his lawyers have been denied 3 times. The Wilson family, including the children, are concerned that the murderer might eventually be released and have started a petition urging that he remain incarcerated. In an interview, Mr. Wilson mentioned hearing rumors that his former relative had attempted to end his life and added that he sincerely hopes the murderer will try again and succeed this time. He also commented on the prevalence of domestic Stockholm Syndrome, where victims often adapt to their abusers throughout their channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Tristan Borlase. On April 10, 2019, a significant tragedy occurred involving 17-year-old Tristan Borlase. This teenager, from a devout family, violently attacked and killed his relatives at their home in Deep Gap, North Carolina. On that Wednesday evening, emergency services received a call from a young woman. She reported a large amount of blood in her home and mentioned that her parents and younger brother were missing. Attempts to reach them had been unsuccessful. Police officers immediately responded to the situation, driving to the family home in Deep Gap, located near the Watauga and Wilkes County border. Upon arrival, they discovered blood on the walkway leading to the house, on the mat by the front door, and trailing inside up the stairs. As officers searched outside the home, they found a man's body covered with leaves under a hammock. The man had multiple stab wounds. Later that night, at about 10:30 p.m., authorities found the family's pickup truck concealed in the woods. Inside was the woman's body covered with a blanket and bags of mulch placed on top of her. Jeffrey Borace, Tristan's father, was born on April 16, 1975. He served as pastor of Pist Bible Fellowship Church, a conservative Protestant movement with Mennonite roots. Tristan grew up in an environment emphasizing personal piety and constant awareness of God's watchful eye. Serious Bible study sessions and moral instructions formed the basis of his upbringing. Even entertainment like laughter or colorful clothing was frowned upon within this community. Things such as good works, charity, missionary work, love for one's enemies, and renunciation of all forms of violence were highly valued virtues. Jeffrey upheld these principles as well, since he was raised under similar circumstances by Pastor Harry Borace. As a boy and young man, Jeffrey exemplified kindness, gentleness, and patience. During his youth as a young adult man, Jeffrey worked at Big Surf Water Park located on Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri during summer breaks from schooling routines back then. On his first day of work, the young man encountered a charming and meek girl named Tanya Mae Trandom. She was of the same age, had similar views, and shared almost identical upbringing with him. Tanya, like Jeffrey, was raised in a family where Christian values were of utmost importance. A patient and humble girl, she saw in the devout man an ideal future husband and a caring father. She gave Jeffrey a picture of an elderly couple holding hands and remarked, "That will be us one day." Jeffrey's mother, Kathy Brown, prayed earnestly that God would bless her son with a wife who loved the Lord wholeheartedly. She believed her prayers were answered when Jeffrey met Tanya. The young couple married and continued living according to the values they were taught in their own families. The photo presented by Tanya was carefully preserved in their family album. Soon after their marriage, the couple welcomed their first child, an adorable girl named Taylor. Not long after Taylor's birth came 3 more children, the youngest being a son named Tristan. Taylor embraced her role as the eldest sibling wholeheartedly. She took care of her brothers and sisters, constantly supporting them. Among all her siblings, she had a special bond with her younger brother Tristan. Despite their age difference, they were inseparable. Jeffrey and Tanya held firm beliefs about parenting, viewing it as their mission to instill Christian values in their children's hearts. As their 4 children grew older, they decided to extend their family further by adopting 4 more boys from an orphanage. Open-hearted and loving according to others' descriptions, their family expanded to include 8 children: Taylor, twins Kay and Alexis, Misery, Ale, Stephen, Miku, and Tristan. In line with the family's religious beliefs, children were not permitted to use cell phones or social networks until reaching a certain age. They emphasized simplicity in needs and desires as well. Additionally, boys were forbidden to engage in romantic relationships until they completed high school at 18 years old. Bible study sessions and other religious activities were mandatory components of their upbringing. Despite these guidelines rooted in asceticism and discipline, the children grew up like any other boys and girls, with love and support from their devoted parents guiding them along the way. Parents made no distinction between native and adopted children. They all received the same attention, care, and affection. The loving mother fostered a harmonious atmosphere, carefully monitoring the internal relationships among brothers and sisters. She prayed frequently and engaged in various good deeds. The couple believed in nurturing virtue through their actions and instilled mercy in their children by setting an example. When a hurricane struck Haiti, Tanya sold her expensive wedding ring and donated the proceeds to a foundation dedicated to building housing for the victims. In place of her costly ring, she acquired a simple, modest one. In 2015, Taylor graduated from high school and moved to Boone to attend Appalachian State University. This event was particularly difficult for Tristan, as he lost his closest companion and found himself alone. Although Taylor returned home at every opportunity, she now had her own independent life, leaving Tristan with the same old rules and routines that he'd always opposed. Tristan had long rebelled against the restrictions his parents imposed since childhood and disagreed with their religious views. He was particularly frustrated by the lack of a cell phone and the inability to connect with peers on social networks, an integral part of modern teenage life. After Taylor's departure, quarrels with his parents increased. In December 2017, there were significant changes within the family's life. Jeffrey, his wife, and their children moved to a new house with a large lot in Deep Gap, Watauga County, North Carolina. The house was situated on a dirt road leading into a wooded area and offered much more space than their previous home. Additionally, it was located just under 2 miles from Robin's residence, Tanya's mother, and the children's grandmother, making it easy to seek her help when needed for looking after the youngest children. He attended the local high school and began participating in and field. Other kids took jobs as counselors at summer camps. At first glance, it might have seemed that there was never any trouble in the Borlas household. Over time, Tristan's behavior became troubling. In 2018, the school insisted on several consultations with a psychologist due to anger issues and a lack of control. By 2019, when Tristan was in high school, he started having trouble understanding some school subjects. These difficulties grew with each passing day. From being a diligent student who always participated in school activities before the move, he turned into an indifferent and withdrawn teenager with a lack of interest in his studies. Tristan began arriving late for lessons and showed no desire to learn at all. It got to the point where he would put his headphones on during class and sit with an absent expression. Some teachers tried to help Tristan, and he even made contact, but everything ended with unchanged indifference. At home, Tristan's behavior also became a concern. By this time, he had everything but constantly argued with his parents about his cell phone and access to social networks. He spent considerable time on the internet. On his Instagram account, he referred to himself as a musician. His sister Taylor remained interested in her siblings' lives and noticed that Tristan quarreled more frequently with their parents and argued about religious topics with their mother. She also learned of his other problems at school. The sister attempted to talk to her brother, but realized their former closeness was gone. After some time, Tristan befriended a girl from the religious community named Evelyn Faith Jackson. They began meeting without particularly observing prohibitions on intimate relations. Sometimes they even smoked forbidden substances together. Tristan expressed complaints about his mother's nightly discussions regarding his behavior, which left him feeling tired and unable to concentrate in school. The young man grew very concerned that many of his faults caused him not to live up to his mother's expectations. She can't take pride in him, told that he can be himself with his father, but it's different with his mother. On April 10, 2019, a lot of secrets from Tristan's life came to light. Surveillance cameras were installed in the barn. Tristan's old cell phone, which he occasionally used without his parents knowing, was used as an access point. On this particular day, Tanya took the phone for some reason and discovered text messages indicating her son was having inappropriate conversations with girls and discussing illegal drugs. Tristan was at school when he noticed his phone blinking with incoming messages. His shocked parents confronted him through a family chat about what they had found on the old phone. That same day, Sher King, an English teacher in Tristan's class, called his mother to complain about his grades and behavior. During the trial, it was revealed that Tanya Borlas had called Miss King back, informing her that she and her husband would soon come to the school to pick Tristan up to discuss his academic performance. Miss King conveyed this message to Tristan, who was quite surprised by the news. The couple left their youngest child with his grandmother and headed to the middle school to address these issues. The the ride home was silent. At trial, Tristan testified that his mother appeared tense and frowned frequently while going through his phone. A conversation ensued at home for about an hour and a half. Afterward, Tanya texted her mother stating that although they had taken away Tristan's phone and car keys until his grades and behavior improved, he did not seem upset by this. She informed her mother that she would be coming soon to pick up the younger child. This message was sent at 4 p.m., after which it seems the discussion continued. From Tristan's account, he and his mother talked about the importance of doing well in school and maintaining cleanliness at home. He was forced to listen and realized there was a lot in him needing correction. They even made a list of qualities should develop to become a better person: compassion, honesty. This list would later be found by the police. At one point, Tristan said his mother approached him from behind, put her arm around his neck, and applied pressure. He instinctively jumped up, turned around, and accidentally her. According to him, his mother had never done anything like that before, so he reacted that way. His mother was startled by the blow, grabbed what he thought were scissors from a shelf, and moved toward her son. In shock at what was happening, he stabbed her thinking he was defending himself and ran to his father for help. Later forensic examination found no evidence on Tristan's neck, indicating his mother strangled him. During the trial, the prosecution showed photos of Tristan Boras's neck taken by the medical examiner that displayed a broken neck bone. On the other hand, the psychologist would explain during the trial that in his opinion Tristan Boras was mentally sane at the time of the crime, but suffered from a severely impaired cognitive state. He was experiencing depersonalization, derealization, and felt events were unreal. However, the court and jury, they would disregard the psychologist's opinion, finding Tristan to be a skillful manipulator and socially dangerous individual. According to Tristan, he did not understand what was happening, or why his father was running away from him, or why he stabbed him when he caught up even though he begged for help. He remembered his father picking up a rock saying, "Tristan, don't," but thought his father would rather let him be killed than try to harm him. Neighbors later reported hearing loud screams on the Boras property at about 5:30 p.m. that Wednesday. After it was over, Tristan returned to the house where he vomited, indicating severe stress, not cold-blooded, calculated murder in the psychologist's opinion. The jury disagreed with the psychologist's opinion because they had seen the forensic medical examiner's reports during the trial. Jeffrey B.'s autopsy report detailed multiple stab wounds to his left chest back, slash wounds his arms and hands, and abrasions his skull and forehead. Tanya Borla's autopsy report showed that she had multiple wounds in her left chest and arm, while as injuries likely sustained from neck compression. These findings suggested that the parents were defending themselves rather than attacking. Tristan had an opportunity to escape from his mother if he felt threatened. Even if the mother experienced a sudden lapse of judgment or misperceived self-defense, the father's murder and subsequent actions appeared different. Tristan returned home, removed his mother's body, placed it in a truck under a tarp, cleaned the crime scene for about an hour, and even used a hose to wash down the porch. Around 8:30 p.m., Tristan went to his grandmother's house to pick up his younger brother. His brother Robin thought this was very strange. Tristan explained that his parents urgently needed to go to the store and apologized for not having time to stop by to pick up his brother. About 20 minutes later, Robin received a call from another grandson who complained that their parents were not answering the phone and hadn't come to pick him up from work as usual. Grandma called Alexis and asked her to retrieve her brother. They agreed to meet at Jeffrey and Tanya's house to figure out what had happened. When they arrived at the house, Robin noticed blood on the porch, but wasn't overly concerned since the couple raised animals there. She went inside to get a flashlight to check on them and discovered blood everywhere. At this point, Alexis ran into the house reporting she found some kind of body under a hammock near the animal barn and thought she saw Tristan with blood on his face in a getaway car. Alexis called emergency services. The operator instructed her and all family members to lock themselves in the car and wait for the police. The police arrived 10 minutes later. After several hours of waiting outside and talking to officers, they were taken to the station where they were informed that Jeffrey and Tanya Barassi had been found dead. While examining the crime scene, detectives found a computer interface in the home. It connected the video surveillance system inside the house to the monitors. Detectives saw a screen with a grid of various cameras broadcasting live video feeds. They immediately requested a warrant to obtain credentials from the servicing company. Meanwhile, Tristan contacted his girlfriend Evelyn and went over to her home. She noticed he seemed worried and had a few scratches on his forehead and arms. Tristan assured her that he had only argued with his parents and got the scratches while playing with his dog. Evelyn described Tristan's injuries: 3 scratches on his forehead, a wound on his hand, a cut on his finger, and a bruised fingernail. Right after the crime, Tristan posted a photo of his injuries on Snapchat, saying he was hurt by his father's dog. According to Evelyn, this photo matched what she saw that evening. Tristan stayed over that night. The next morning, they went to Walmart and McDonald's, but decided against going to school. Evelyn thought Tristan just wanted some time away from his parents, so she suggested staying with one of her relatives for a while. He agreed, and they traveled to another state. On April 11th, Sheriff's Office personnel obtained the username and password to the Barassi home's video surveillance system. After reviewing the camera footage, they learned about the circumstances of the crime. Police obtained a warrant for Tristan's arrest and turned over details about their vehicle. He allegedly drove away to the National Crime Information Center. A search of the car began, and soon after, a chase ensued. Investigator Matthew received intel that Tristan had been spotted in Tennessee and quickly began the paperwork necessary to catch the alleged perpetrator. He requested Robin, Tristan's grandmother, to accompany him during the apprehension so he could speak to Tristan in her presence due to his young age. As they were driving with Evelyn, Tristan noticed blue lights trailing them. He accelerated and told his friend that his parents must have registered the car as stolen to locate him. Speeding down the highway, he tried to evade capture, but eventually pulled over when he couldn't escape his pursuers any longer. The Ford was quickly surrounded by police cars. Evelyn was utterly confused upon witnessing her boyfriend being handcuffed and taken away in a squad car. The officers observed that Tristan did not appear particularly upset or agitated. On April 11, 2019, investigator Matthew conducted an interview with Tristan. It was both videotaped and audio recorded. The young man answered all questions, confessed to the crime, and detailed his actions in full, occasionally breaking into tears. Tristan Boras, who was just a month shy of his 18th birthday, was taken into custody without bail. Shortly thereafter, the sheriff's office secured a warrant to search Tristan's Snapchat account, along with 5 cell phones that could contain pertinent information related to the crime. Another warrant was issued for the Orchard Road home, where detectives discovered another phone in the master bedroom, alongside various items including a keyboard, pen from a safe, paper cups, hammer, straw, knives, red-stained swab eyeglasses, kitchen towel hammock, digital video recorder, rug, and miscellaneous papers, South Dakota cards, boots. According to court documents, a search warrant was also issued for the Ford F-150 truck, where investigators seized a red-stained swab laptop, top computer charger, and steering wheel cover. Additionally, authorities obtained a warrant to search the home of Tristan's girlfriend in Boone, since he had spent the night at her house. Court documents state that a pillowcase, a zippered sweatshirt, and a notebook were seized from the property. The findings from the investigations and searches enabled investigators to piece together the chronology of events in great detail. The claim of self-defense was found to be untenable. Funeral services for the couple took place on April 17, 2019, at Bible Fellowship Church, with pastors William C.R. and Brad Gray officiating the ceremony. The children, grappling with the loss of their parents at such a young age, managed to write an emotive obituary. Our parents never got the opportunity to live for themselves because they always lived for us. Jeff and Tanya have always brought immense joy and pride to their parents. Our parents made the world a better place, and we aim to continue that legacy by passionately loving people and pursuing faith. After the funeral, Taylor visited her brother in prison for the first time and was taken aback by his demeanor. Tristan showed no remorse and attempted to lay blame on the family for the incident. To his sister, it appeared he believed he would regain his freedom eventually. Disgusted, Taylor left. Her second visit was on May 11th for Tristan's birthday, accompanied by Grandma Robin. However, this meeting fared no better than the last. Her brother boasted about a party thrown for him in prison to celebrate his birthday, a behavior Taylor found unacceptable considering their parents' tragic death. Following this visit, the family decided to sever all contact with Tristan. The trial began on February 16, 2022. During proceedings, Tristan expressed regret for what had transpired and concurred with everything his family had said about him. He supported a permanent ban on contact to ensure his family's sense of safety. On March 3rd, Tristan Bohr was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for each count of first-degree murder. Judge Horn noted that mental health issues were considered as somewhat mitigating factors during sentencing. According to the psychologist's report, Tristan Borlas continues to suffer from anxiety, depression, and exhibits symptoms consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder. However, Judge Horn noted that the psychologist found no indication of psychotic disorders. Although the anxiety and depression may have been exacerbated by continued drug use, what's particularly unusual in this case is that neither Tristan's family, nor his lawyer, nor he himself provided any statements about his motives behind the crime. Here we have a perplexing situation. A devout family with a socially dangerous individual who abused illegal drugs and couldn't fully grasp or articulate the reasons for his actions. On one hand, there's a young man with low self-esteem who exhibits symptoms of anxiety and hasn't received adequate medical care. During the court session, it was mentioned that his mother helped him cope with panic attacks since she experienced them herself. One foundational principle of certain educational theories posits that children burdened with original sin are inherently immoral from birth. Therefore, education must correct them by imposing strict discipline and suppressing their self-awareness. This so-called strict love is supposedly beneficial for children. Tristan might have had an inherited overreactivity of the nervous system and grew up under stringent limits, constantly feeling inadequate as a devout individual. Some require more love, while others require less. According to recollections shared by his older sister, Tristan was intensely jealous of new siblings who diverted parental attention away from him. Initially rebellious, he then sank into depression and feelings of worthlessness, compounded by illicit drug use and subsequent panic attacks, as well as depersonalization, derealization states. He couldn't embrace his parents' devotion to their faith and couldn't meet his mother's expectations or align with what she envisioned for him, which required correction. Instead of securing a competent therapist's assistance as needed, changes were listed together by him and his mother. This approach may have missed critical opportunities to address underlying issues. Could this senseless and tragic event have been avoided in a truly loving family? That remains uncertain, a question echoic in the aftermath. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. On January 12, 2019, a report emerged regarding the death of 65-year-old Michael Redlich. He was a former NBA executive with the Memphis Grizzlies and a respected professor at the University of Central Florida. Initially believed to have died from a heart attack, it was later revealed that he had been stabbed in the chest. There were speculations about the incident, including the possibility of self-inflicted harm. Forensic experts eventually confirmed that it was a homicide, and Michael's wife was identified as the perpetrator. In June 2022, Michael's wife, Danielle Redlich, went to trial, but the case remained complex. She did not admit to premeditated murder, and her testimony changed throughout the legal proceedings. The legal battle between the prosecution and defense was intense. Danielle Redlich, a 46-year-old woman, she had a petite stature and a slender physique, with chestnut hair that had turned gray either. Before the incident, Danielle was a regular American woman, a mother of two, and a specialist in multimedia communications. She wasn't particularly well known until the crime against her husband brought her into the public eye. Danielle was born in Florida in 1976 and later moved to Cleveland, Ohio with her family. Her upbringing was typical, growing up kind and well-mannered with a personality. Her appreciation for beauty deepened as she grew older. She attended Valencia College and earned an Associate of Arts degree before joining Baldwin Wallace University's psychology department in 1996. In 1996, Danielle's mother remarried, but the marriage was short-lived due to Caitlin's passing from cancer. Caitlin had been battling breast cancer for a while and received quality medical care through her husband's insurance, but unfortunately, the treatment was unsuccessful. After her mother's death, Danielle and her siblings went to live with their stepfather, Michael Redlich. Michael later became Danielle's husband and met his tragic end in 2019. Their relationship started as a friendship and evolved over time as Danielle cared for the younger children and worked part-time jobs. Michael, focused on his career in professional sports, particularly player recruitment, grew attached to the children and developed a strong bond with Danielle. Despite their age gap, their relationship blossomed naturally. Danielle initially kept their relationship hidden from her family, but eventually revealed it. They found happiness and support in each other's company. Michael used his connections to help Danielle secure a job at an advertising agency. With his good income, he devoted all his free time to family activities. The circumstances were favorable for both of them. Mr. Redlich received a job offer as vice president of corporate sales for the Memphis Grizzlies basketball club. This new role required him to move to a different state. He asked Danielle to go with him, but she hesitated due to her studies and attachment to her current lifestyle. She declined, but they maintained their relationship long distance with frequent visits. Michael surprised Danielle by showing her the house he had bought for them, a beautiful cottage near the Mississippi River in a peaceful neighborhood. Eventually, Danielle decided to move in with him. To support her decision, Michael helped Danielle find a job in the radio industry. Looking back, Danielle remembered that everything went smoothly at first. Things only changed later due to Michael's demanding job. Years later, during a trial involving Danielle, her daughter Jaden testified about Michael's vital role as a father in raising them both. They attended prestigious schools with their father's encouragement in sports programs. Jaden had a strong bond with her father, but felt disconnected from her mother, viewing her as problematic. She believed her mother caused conflicts at home, while Michael aimed for family harmony. What caused the discord in their seemingly happy family? Michael's new job brought more responsibilities and stress, leading to a strained relationship with management. He started drinking heavily. Despite Danielle's efforts to support him, Michael's drinking led to conflicts. One significant incident occurred when Michael struck Danielle during an argument. He regretted his actions, seeking immediate medical help for Danielle's injuries. The next day, Michael made a heartfelt gesture to show his remorse and care for Danielle, who forgave him and decided not to report the incident. Despite a strict domestic violence law in the state, Danielle chose not to cause trouble for her husband, as this wasn't the first warning sign. Similar behavior had occurred before. In 2003, the Redlichs had a daughter named Jaden. A year later, they decided to formalize their relationship. Their family life seemed positive, but Michael's work issues persisted, affecting their family dynamics. 7 years later, they welcomed their son Sawyer. The situation between Michael and Danielle grew increasingly tense as Michael started drinking again, leading to more frequent conflicts. One altercation turned physical when he grabbed Danielle by the throat and pinned her against the wall, terrifying her. Unable to bear his violent behavior, Danielle left with the kids to live with her relatives, who initially disapproved of their marriage but eventually accepted it. Michael visited frequently, asking for forgiveness and urging Danielle to return. After some time, they reconciled, but their relationship remained turbulent as they moved multiple times due to Michael's job opportunities. In 2014, both unemployed and living off savings, they faced another relocation to Indiana. While the prospect of a new home seemed promising, Danielle stayed in California with the children to handle their property sale. The constant moving took a toll on the family, especially the children, who struggled to adapt. Over about a year, their financial situation improved, but the distance strained Michael and Danielle's marriage. They communicated less and grew apart. When they reunited, new challenges arose. Danielle suspected infidelity due to Michael's distant behavior, but he revealed health issues he had been hiding. After trying various treatments, he opted for testosterone injections, revitalizing him physically and mentally, but also making him more aggressive. One night, after an incident of violence, Danielle decided to leave, but Michael begged for forgiveness. Despite the turmoil, they stayed together, raising their children. However, their relationship had changed irreversibly, leading to more conflicts and increased drinking from Michael. His discontent often turned to physical aggression, but Danielle, deeply in love, stayed. The ongoing tension affected her deeply, making her anxious and withdrawn. She found solace in photography. Despite their troubles, the family appeared normal to outsiders. By the end of the year, they settled in Florida, where Michael changed careers. His new job brought stability and joy, though less pay than before. They eventually bought a home in Winter Park, where Danielle preferred the attic to escape Michael's outbursts. Danielle struggled with alcohol addiction, while Michael supported the family. She handled household tasks and the children, isolating herself due to disputes leading to their separation in 2016. Despite this, Michael continued to financially support and visit the children. Danielle found a job at a school where new friends helped her overcome depression and regain independence. Although Michael had freedom to come and go, Danielle still interacted with him. An argument led to Danielle being hospitalized with a concussion. She stayed silent out of fear, but Michael misinterpreted her silence. During questioning, Danielle revealed that in October 2016, Michael had tried to run her over with his car, prompting her to go to the police briefly before leaving due to fear. They reconciled and moved back in together, which had tragic consequences. On January 12, 2019, a 911 call from Danielle reported Michael's apparent heart attack. Upon arrival, authorities found a suspicious scene with a strong cleaning agent smell, a pink liquid bucket, and Michael dead from a knife wound, not a heart attack as claimed. Danielle had wrist cuts, receiving medical attention before police began their investigation. Forensic analysis indicated someone else caused Michael's death, disproving self-harm. The pink liquid was diluted blood, an attempt to conceal evidence that ultimately failed, leaving visible blood splatters in the house. Furthermore, it is important to note that a large knife was found at the entrance of the kitchen, while 3 smaller knives were discovered inside the sink. After doctors confirmed that her injuries were not life-threatening, she was questioned. During the interview, she frequently changed her statements. Initially, she claimed to have thought her husband died of heart disease. Later, she stated he had taken his own life following an argument. However, the evidence refuted her claims, as it is difficult for such a wound to be self-inflicted, and individuals intending to end their lives usually choose simpler and less painful methods. The autopsy revealed that Michael died from blood loss. With timely medical help, his life could have been saved. Additionally, he had a lacerated left eye. Toxicological tests showed high levels of alcohol in his system. The investigation found that a few days before the incident, there was an argument between the spouses witnessed by their elder daughter. Michael had been drinking and burst into the bathroom where Danielle was hiding. However, their daughter Jaden intervened and took the bottle away from him. After this incident, Danielle left the house and returned once her husband had fallen asleep. According to Jayden, it was the first time she had seen such a burst of anger in her father, for which he later apologized multiple times. She still believed he was a loving and caring father, but asserted that her mother often instigated conflicts. The next day, the couple reconciled, and Michael invited his wife and children to a soccer game. However, witnesses noted that Danielle appeared upset and was virtually non-communicative that evening. The parents dropped their kids off at a friend's house for a sleepover and were left alone afterward. Later in the evening, Danielle stopped by McDonald's and returned home around 10:30 p.m. Upon entering the house, she found her husband drunk again. During dinner, Danielle received a message from an unknown man. Michael saw it, bit off a piece of his hamburger, and spat it at his wife. He then attacked her and attempted to strangle her. In self-defense, Danielle grabbed the first thing she could find, a knife, and stabbed him in the chest. He fell and began to bleed profusely. The defendant claimed she immediately called emergency services, but accidentally dialed the wrong number. Her actions were confirmed during the investigation. In a state of shock, she lay down next to Michael and fell asleep until morning. When asked by the prosecution why she lied during the emergency call and questioning, Mrs. Redlich said she was afraid and worried that no one would believe she acted in self-defense. There were reasons for this fear. Shortly before the incident, she had a scuffle with friends. When the police arrived, she resisted, even trying to bite one of them. She also refused to cooperate with the investigation, resulting in charges of disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. Danielle had been on probation for about a year. It was also found that the cuts on her wrists were self-inflicted. She claimed she had tried to end her life due to emotional turmoil, but the injuries were superficial and not life-threatening. Therefore, her claims were not believed. Investigators also discovered that Danielle was not a role model. After finding out about Michael's infidelities, she joined a dating site where she interacted with men and was unfaithful in retaliation. Her profile stated she was single. Analysis of messages between Michael and Danielle showed she still loved her husband. Learning of his affairs left her feeling betrayed and disillusioned. She also found out Michael planned to leave her despite his repentance and desire to mend their relationship. Danielle explained she found it difficult to understand and accept her husband's actions. She was heartbroken to realize she had devoted the best years of her life to a man who didn't appreciate her. The prosecution used the information against her in court. They argued that the crime was premeditated, committed in a fit of rage because she couldn't forgive his infidelity and the impending divorce as Mr. Redlich had planned. Neighbors confirmed her frequent fits of anger, noting that the couple often had loud arguments that sometimes turned physical. People who knew them saw Michael in a positive light, viewing him as kind and helpful. On the other hand, Danielle was perceived as quarrelsome. Video evidence displayed her irrationally attacking her husband. Friends and Michael's brother supported this portrayal. One person even remembered calling her crazy, but assured others that things would be fine if steak knives were hidden. Her lawyer argued that her actions were in self-defense, stemming from years of emotional and physical abuse. Family members who witnessed their arguments confirmed Michael's rough and emotionally abusive behavior. They were aware of his frequent physical abuse and humiliation towards her, although not in their presence. Some family members mentioned that Danielle became nervous and quick-tempered only after years of marriage. The prosecution emphasized that she left her husband to die, indicating premeditation. They pointed out that she logged into a dating app the night of the incident, suggesting hatred and resentment, possibly for financial gain. After a divorce, Danielle stood to lose part of their accumulated wealth. At the time of Michael's death, her net worth was estimated at around $1.2 million. Furthermore, it was noted that she frequently changed her statements during the investigation and potentially tampered with evidence. However, the defense argued that Mr. Redlich was a manipulator and predator. Following his first wife's death, he relentlessly pursued his stepdaughter and shaped a young woman to meet his needs. During the investigation, the prosecution offered Danielle a plea deal to admit to manslaughter, which would have resulted in only 10 years of imprisonment. She declined. Even though if found guilty of first or second-degree murder, she faced a life sentence. She kept insisting she was innocent. The trial outcome shocked everyone. On July 17, 2022, the jury gave their verdict. They found Danielle Redlich not guilty of premeditated murder. They believed her actions were in self-defense. However, they did find her guilty of tampering with evidence, for which she received a 5-year suspended sentence. Having already served 3 years, these were credited toward her sentence. On August 5, 2022, when the sentence was announced, the defendant was released in the courtroom. What do you think? Was the verdict fair, or were the jurors misled into believing Danielle's actions were justified? Take a look at another horrible case with you. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Chris Coleman. On May 5, 2009, the Coleman family, who appeared to have the perfect life, was tragically murdered in their home just before 3 a.m. Let's examine the events of that night. A crime that left a lasting impact on many. Chris Coleman met his future wife, Sherry, while they were both serving in the military. For Sherry, it was love at first sight, and she knew immediately that Chris was the one she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. Within a few months of meeting, Sherry became pregnant with their first child, Garrett. As devout Christians, the couple married before Garrett was born. After Garrett's birth, Chris and Sherry had their second son, Gavin. Gavin was a lively child, whereas Garrett was more laid back, like his father. Both boys had lively personalities and were well behaved. Sherry was a devoted mother who would do anything to protect her sons. Chris was an excellent father, and the family enjoyed quality time together, laughing, playing, and cherishing every moment with their children. After leaving the military, the Colemans moved to Waterloo, Illinois, a small town, where they bought a house in an upscale neighborhood, courtesy of Chris's new job. Chris became the head of security for Joyce Meyer, a renowned TV evangelist and CEO of one of the world's largest Christian ministries. However, controversy arose due to Joyce's multi-million-dollar income and opulent lifestyle, which sparked criticism from some individuals. They accused her of being a greedy con artist who exploited her followers' fears, arguing that her financial success and lavish lifestyle conflicted with her religious teachings. As Joyce's bodyguard and personal security guard, Chris was responsible for monitoring and protecting her from hate mail and letters sent to her church, which often contained threats against her life, with people expressing their intentions to harm her. Chris earned a substantial salary of $100,000 per year working for Joyce's ministry in St. Louis, Missouri, providing financial stability for his family. As part of his job as a bodyguard, Chris frequently accompanied Joyce on international trips, ensuring his safety while abroad. However, this arrangement meant Chris was away from home for extended periods, affecting his family life. In October 2008, Chris visited Tampa, Florida, where his friend Sherry had gone to high school. Sherry got in touch with her old friend Tara Lintz and asked her to look out for Chris while he was in town. After settling in, Chris contacted Tara and they agreed to meet up. Tara kindly showed Chris around the city. On November 14, 2008, at around 11 p.m., Chris received a disturbing email. The sender's email address was destroychris@gmail.com, and the subject line and content terrified him. The email warned Chris to stop working for Joyce Meyer, otherwise he or his family would be killed. Over the next few hours, more threatening emails arrived at the ministry from the same sender, repeating the threat and specifying a time and date when the attack on his family might happen. The sender seemed to know Chris's schedule and was aware that he would soon be traveling out of the country. Chris told Sherry about the threatening emails he'd been getting, and on the following Monday, He went to the local police station to report them. He explained that he'd been away from home a lot lately because he'd been traveling with Joyce Meyer Ministries. The police offered to increase their patrols around the house when Chris was away. But even with the extra police presence, Sherry was still afraid for her family's safety. Sherry was so scared that she once asked a friend to stay with her because she didn't feel safe staying alone in the house when Chris was away. She made it clear that she would do whatever it took to keep her family safe. To prove how serious she was, Sherry showed her friend that she had a gun and demonstrated how to hold it, just in case someone broke into the house while Chris was away and she wasn't there. 2 months after the death threats started, a mysterious hand-delivered letter arrived in the Coleman's mailbox. The letter was written in bold letters and was very demanding. It said, "Deny your God publicly or else. No more opportunities. Time is running out for you and your family." This threat was very ominous and specific, stating that if the Colemans didn't do what the writer wanted, they would face severe consequences. Sherry was deeply shaken by the disturbing message. The fact that someone had invaded her private space and threatened her and her family made her feel genuinely terrified throughout the ordeal. Sherry's fear grew more intense by the day. The letter she received was a constant reminder of the potential danger that lurked in the shadows, waiting to pounce. After getting a death threat in the mail, Sherry and her husband Chris decided to take extra measures to protect their family. As part of their safety plan, Chris installed surveillance cameras around their home. These cameras recorded the surroundings and sent the footage to a screen in their basement office. The footage was also saved on a digital video recorder, allowing Chris to keep a permanent record of any incidents. He hoped the cameras would help him identify the person behind the threats against their family. After the cameras were installed, the threats against the Colemans stopped. Life returned to normal for Chris, Sherry, and their sons, Garrett and Gavin. For a while, everything seemed fine. In April 2009, Sherry confided in others that she was feeling more optimistic about her marriage and was determined to make it work. She was relieved the death threats had stopped and felt a sense of happiness. However, Sherry's optimism was short-lived. A second ominous letter arrived at the Coleman home, warning her that her worst fears were about to become a reality. Chris, her husband, was unsettled by the letter's contents and decided to review the previous night's footage from their security camera. What he saw shocked him. A mysterious silhouette caught his attention, but its identity remained unclear. This new discovery reignited Sherry's fear for her own and her children's safety, plunging her back into a state of constant unease. The brief sense of security she had felt was now gone, replaced by the feeling that her worst nightmare was closing in. The local police boosted their efforts due to the rising threats against the Coleman family. A neighbor, Detective Sergeant Justin Barlow from the Columbia Police Department, took a keen interest in the case. Detective Barlow personally called Chris to discuss the situation. During their conversation, Detective Barlow mentioned that he had noticed Chris's recent work absences from home. He offered help, providing his cell phone number in case Chris needed anything or had concerns. Detective Barlow reassured Chris that he could respond faster in an emergency than the regular police. Detective Justin Barlow lived across the street from the Coleman family, so he set up video cameras to monitor their driveway over several weeks. Although the cameras captured footage of the Colemans going about their daily routines, they did not capture the person responsible for leaving the death threats. Despite his efforts, the videos did not provide any clues or information about the identity of the person behind the threatening messages. On May 5, 2009, Chris went to the gym at 5:45 a.m. After leaving his house around 5:30 a.m., he called his home phone at 6:45 a.m. to check if his wife Sherry and their sons were up and getting ready for school. When no one answered, Chris became worried and called his neighbor, Detective Justin Barlow, at 6:45 a.m. to ask for his help. Chris explained to Detective Barlow that he had been trying to reach Sherry while he was at the gym, but she wasn't picking up. This made Chris increasingly concerned, so he asked Detective Barlow to check on Sherry and the boys. Detective Barlow prepared himself by grabbing his essential items, including his weapon, handcuffs, flashlight, and radio, before heading to the Coleman residence. While waiting for backup to arrive, his main goal was to make contact with Sherry and ensure everything was okay. With a mix of anticipation and apprehension, Detective Barlow approached the door and knocked firmly, hoping to get a response. However, the silence that followed made him feel uneasy. The lights inside the house were off, and there was no sign of movement, which only added to his bad feeling. Within minutes of Detective Justin Barlow's arrival at the Coleman home, a patrol vehicle pulled up with an additional officer to assist him. The second officer was sent to the rear of the house to try to see through a door or window or establish contact with Sherry or the boys at the back of the house. But as soon as the officer reached the back, he found signs of forced entry into the basement. This discovery immediately grabbed Detective Barlow's attention, and he began to suspect that someone inside the house was in danger. Detective Barlow was deeply concerned for the safety of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin after discovering the signs of forced entry into the Coleman home. Detective Barlow and the second officer decided to enter the premises through the basement. They announced their presence, but received no response. As they thoroughly searched the basement, they found a disconnected video cable at the computer desk. This led them to conclude that the camera's digital video recorder had been taken. Detective Justin Barlow and another officer made their way up from the basement of the Coleman home, ascending the stairs to the main level. As they climbed, they noticed an increasingly strong smell of aerosol spray paint. Once they reached the top, they saw that the wall had been spray painted with derogatory messages targeting Chris, Sherry, and their sons. 13 minutes after Chris phoned Detective Justin Barlow, Chris returned home from the gym. The detective told him to wait outside while they searched the house. Chris complied, sitting quietly on the porch without asking questions or trying to enter. Meanwhile, a third officer arrived at the Coleman residence. The three officers knew they had to search the rest of the house for Sherry and her sons. As they went upstairs, they found more hate-filled messages spray-painted on the walls when they reached the second story of the Coleman home. Detective Justin Barlow entered Garrett's bedroom, the oldest son's room, and initially thought he was asleep. But when he got closer, the detective realized Garrett was dead. There were no signs of life, and his body was cold to the touch. Ligature marks around his neck indicated the young boy had been murdered by strangulation. The discovery of Garrett's lifeless body shocked Detective Barlow. In the next room, the second officer found Gavin, but to his horror, the boy was also dead, just like his brother. Gavin also had ligature marks around his neck, indicating he had been strangled. The killer had even spray-painted an obscene message on the bed sheets, making the scene even more horrific. The third officer entered the master bedroom, where he was met with a deeply disturbing scene. Sherry, like her sons, was lying lifeless across the bed, her hair scattered over her face, hiding her features. It was obvious to the officer that Sherry had been brutally murdered. As he surveyed the room, he noticed multiple bruises on Sherry's body, suggesting that she had fiercely resisted her attacker, fighting to defend herself and her sons. After Detective Justin Barlow and the officers discovered the lifeless bodies of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin, Chris entered the house, having waited outside for news about his family. Unaware of the gravity of the situation, Chris announced his presence. Detective Barlow then had the heartbreaking task of informing Chris that his entire family had been murdered. This devastating news crushed Chris, leaving him reeling. To give Chris some privacy to process the information, Detective Barlow accompanied him outside. However, as the reality of the situation set in, Chris's reaction was overwhelming. He became nauseous, and his body seemed to weaken. Overcome with grief, Chris curled up in a fetal position, unable to contain the torrent of emotions. The shock of the tragedy was too much for him to absorb. Chris couldn't comprehend the brutal way his family had been taken from him. In desperation, Chris reached out to his father, Ronald, and informed him that something had happened to Sherry and the boys. Ronald immediately realized Chris was in shock upon receiving the news. Ronald was equally stunned, unable to believe that this tragedy had befallen his family. News of the shocking murders of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin Coleman spread swiftly throughout Waterloo, Illinois, where the family lived. As the community awoke to the grim news, neighbors were left devastated and terrified. The Coleman family had always been perceived as the epitome of a perfect American family, with their charming sons, Garrett and Gavin, admired by everyone. In fact, one neighbor went so far as to say that everyone would want their children to be like Garrett and Gavin, who were always polite, helpful, and kind-hearted. For Sherry's brother and mother, the harsh reality of the brutal crime was impossible to accept. Chris Coleman, the husband and father, was taken to a nearby police station for questioning after his wife and 2 sons were discovered murdered. During the interrogation, Detective Justin Barlow asked Chris if he could shed any light on the killings. Chris expressed deep regret for leaving to go to the gym, leaving Sherry and the boys alone in the home. When Detective Barlow asked Chris if he had any idea who could have committed the murders, Chris claimed he had no idea. However, several aspects of Chris's behavior during the interview raised suspicions with the detective. One of the detective's initial concerns was Chris's lack of curiosity about the circumstances surrounding his wife and son's murder. Given the gravity of the situation, it seemed odd that Chris didn't ask questions about their deaths. Instead, he appeared uninterested in finding out the details. Additionally, the detective noticed that Chris tried to conceal scratches on his arms during the interview. He asked for a blanket, despite the warm room temperature, to hide the injuries. These scratches raised suspicions as the detective knew that Sherry, Chris's wife, had fought for her life. When questioned about the scratches, Chris claimed they resulted from installing a satellite dish the day before. During the police interview, Chris denied having an affair outside of his marriage. However, he admitted to having a close friendship with Tara, a cocktail waitress, and high school friend of his wife's who lived in Florida. Chris claimed that his wife wouldn't have approved of their conversations, but he maintained that he had no intention of leaving his wife for Tara. He insisted that he would never consider betraying his family in such a way. A different story unfolded when detectives contacted Tara in Florida. Tara claimed that her relationship with Chris went beyond friendship, alleging a full-blown affair that started in November 2008. She handed over her phone and laptop to the police, which contained convincing evidence of their romance, including emails, explicit photos, and videos they had exchanged. When confronted with Tara's information, Chris confessed to seeing her more frequently than he initially admitted. Further investigation revealed that Chris and Tara had devised a secret meeting system, often coinciding with his work trips for Joyce Meyer. They would secretly meet at these locations, sometimes traveling to exotic destinations like Hawaii to spend time together away from their families. Chris claimed his relationship with Tara wasn't an affair, defining an affair as involving a deeper level of commitment and involvement than they had. However, detectives found contradictory evidence on Tara's phone and computer, including a calendar marked with a wedding to Chris and scheduled vacations, suggesting she believed he would leave his family for her. This evidence raised suspicions, contradicting Chris's assertion that their relationship was casual. Chris's father, Ronald, was shocked by the revelation, but insisted that the affair had no connection to the murders of Chris's wife and son. He described Chris as gentle and non-violent, emphasizing that he showed no signs of aggression. Detectives suspected Chris's affair with Tara was a strong motive for the murders, but their initial investigation found insufficient evidence to press charges. After 6 hours of questioning, Chris was released without charges. Tara was identified as a person of interest in the murders of Sherry Garrett and Gavin. However, detectives cleared her as a suspect after determining she was in Florida on the morning of May 5, 2009, when the family was killed. The Coleman family murders led to one of the largest murder investigations in Illinois history. A task force of 25 detectives was formed to catch the killer. For 15 consecutive days, they worked 20-hour shifts, bringing in experts to assist with the case. A key focus of the task force was tracing the source of the hate-filled emails sent to Chris Coleman. Every threatening email received by Joyce Meyer Ministries in the past year was carefully analyzed, leading the team to locations across the country. Each person who emailed Joyce Meyer was tracked down and interviewed, but none of the individuals who sent those threats seemed to be responsible for the Coleman family's murder. A computer forensic team was called in to investigate the murders of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin. The detectives wanted to find any digital clues related to the crime, so they began by analyzing the email account, diarist@gmail.com. Their analysis revealed that the email address was created on November 14, 2008. Just days before the first email was sent. One of the most significant discoveries made by the team was that the death threats sent to Chris Coleman's family had originated from the same IP address associated with Chris himself. The detectives continued their investigation into the Coleman family's murder by conducting a thorough examination of both the spray-painted messages found at the crime scene and Christopher Coleman's handwriting to gather evidence. They took photographs of the spray-painted messages at the crime scene and collected samples of Christopher Coleman's handwriting. These samples were then sent to a handwriting expert for analysis. After comparing the two samples, the expert concluded that the handwriting matched the spray-painted messages. This finding led the detectives to conclude that Christopher Coleman was the one who wrote the messages on the walls of his home on the day of the murders. A chemical analysis of the spray paint used at the crime scene identified the brand and color as Rust-Oleum Candy Apple Red. Investigators learned that Chris Coleman had bought this exact product at a local hardware store just days before his family was killed. One detective contacted the store manager, who confirmed the purchase and identified the specific product as Rust-Oleum Candy Apple Red spray paint. This crucial discovery linked Chris Coleman to the same type of spray paint found at the murder scene. During the investigation into the Coleman family's murder, the time of death became a crucial factor. Initially, Chris claimed to have left his home around 5:45 a.m. on May 5, 2009, the morning his family was killed. However, the medical examiner's report showed that Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin were killed around 3 a.m., indicating that Chris was at home when his family was murdered. 2 weeks after the bodies were discovered, Chris Coleman was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. The prosecution's argument was that the murders were motivated by greed, selfishness, and narcissism, and that Chris had decided to eliminate his family to start anew. In April 2011, Chris Coleman's trial began, with the state accusing him of murdering his wife, Sherry, and their 2 sons, Garrett and Gavin. The prosecution's case was that Chris had killed his family because he wanted to be with Tara Lynn, but couldn't divorce his wife due to the potential loss of his well-paying job with Joyce Meyer Ministries, which did not condone divorce. Conversely, Chris's defense attorney argued that Chris was innocent and that an intruder had entered the home on May 5, 2009, and committed the murders. Exactly 2 years after the devastating murders of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin, Chris Coleman was finally found guilty of the heinous crime. Although eligible for the death penalty, the judge instead sentenced Chris to life imprisonment without parole. This verdict was influenced by the state of Illinois' recent repeal of the death penalty, which was set to take effect just months after the tragic incident. Sherry's loved ones and friends were resolute in keeping her, Garrett, and Gavin's memories alive and sought to do something meaningful to honor them. They decided to raise funds for victims of domestic violence, a cause that deeply resonated. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jonathan Hoffman. Jonathan Hoffman was born in Michigan in 1994 to Jennifer and Michael Hoffman. His sister Jessica was born 3 years later, and from a very young age, the two siblings formed an unbreakable bond and shared a special connection that would last a lifetime. However, Jonathan's parents, Jennifer and Michael, faced significant struggles in their marriage, and their frequent fights often forced them to leave Jonathan and Jessica in the care of their grandmother, Sandra. Sandra, Jennifer's mother, played a crucial role in the lives of her grandchildren, providing a safe, loving, and nurturing environment for them. The children cherished the time they spent with their grandmother, who offered them a sense of stability in an otherwise tumultuous upbringing. In 2008, after years of turmoil, Jennifer and Michael divorced when Jonathan was a senior at Farmington Central High School. Following the divorce, Jennifer made the difficult decision to relocate the family from Michigan to Arizona. This move was particularly hard for Jonathan, who was forced to leave behind the only life he had ever known, including his friends, familiar surroundings, and the comfort of his childhood home. The situation rapidly deteriorated for Jonathan and his family after they moved to Arizona. Not long after their relocation, his younger sister Jessica fell critically ill. Medical tests revealed a tumor in her brain, prompting urgent surgery to remove it the very next day. Although the operation was a success, it entailed a lengthy convalescence, and Jessica spent an entire month recovering in the hospital. Throughout this period, Jennifer dedicated herself fully to her daughter's recovery, neglecting her own needs in the process. This left Jonathan feeling abandoned and lonely, forced to navigate the challenges of adolescence in a new state without the emotional support of his mother and sister. Recognizing the strain Jonathan was under, his grandmother Sandra reached out to Jennifer, deeply concerned about her grandson's well-being. Believing familiar surroundings and old friends would bring Jonathan solace, Sandra suggested he return to Michigan to live with her and her husband Fred. Jennifer worried whether her 74-year-old mother would be capable of caring for him, but Sandra reassured her that she was more than capable. 1 month after the Hoffman family's move to Arizona, Jonathan returned to Michigan and moved in with Sandra and Fred. The homecoming brought Jonathan immense joy and relief midway through his senior year of high school. Thrilled to be back among friends and family, he felt a sense of comfort and belonging he had missed in Arizona. His friends recall that Jonathan was initially shy, but once he opened up, he was a lot of fun and loved to make people laugh. With a zest for adventure, he was always up for trying new things. Although Jennifer deeply missed her son, she embarked on the journey to Michigan to spend 2 weeks with him. During her visit, she was dismayed to discover that Jonathan had been smoking marijuana. However, Jennifer viewed this as a typical phase of teenage experimentation and was confident it didn't involve harder substances. With a heavy heart, Jennifer bid farewell to Jonathan, confident that he would be in good hands with his grandmother. But little did she know, Jonathan was in grave peril, and it was at the hands of his grandmother, Sandra. On May 19, 2017, at 5:27 p.m., Jonathan Hoffman made a frantic 911 call, his voice trembling as he relayed to the dispatcher that his grandmother had shot him and he was dying. The dispatcher sprang into action, swiftly dispatching police and paramedics to Jonathan's residence. As she spoke to him, she tried to reassure him that help was on the way, her voice steady amidst the chaos and fear in his. Suddenly, an ominous silence fell on the line, and for a moment, the dispatcher feared the connection had been dropped, or worse, that Jonathan had succumbed to his injuries. But then, just as her heart sank, she heard a barrage of gunfire erupt from the phone, followed by a pained cry. Jonathan yelled, "Ow!" as his voice cracked with terror, telling the operator that his grandmother had shot him again. The West Bloomfield Township Police Department officers responded swiftly to the scene, arriving at Sandra Lane's house at 5:33 p.m. As they approached, the sound of gunfire echoed from within the residence. Trained to handle such situations, the officers didn't hesitate, taking necessary precautions to ensure their safety. They positioned themselves behind their patrol vehicles, using them as cover from their vantage point. Observing a woman moving inside the house, they issued clear, direct commands, ordering the individual to put their weapon on the ground. After a tense moment, the officers heard the sound of a gun being secured, and with the assurance that the person inside had put the firearm away, they entered the residence. When the police made it inside the home, they found 74-year-old Sandra Lane standing before them, a Glock 17 .40 caliber handgun at her feet. Sandra repeated several times in an eerily calm tone that she had murdered her grandson, stating the disturbing sentiment as fact. One of the police officers asked Sandra why she had killed her grandson, but she remained silent, offering no explanation. 2 minutes after the police arrived, Sandra was handcuffed and placed in the back of a patrol vehicle. Officers entered her home to find the victim, whom Sandra claimed was her grandson, 17-year-old Jonathan Hoffman. Inside the home, the air was thick with smoke, making it difficult to see through the haze as they ascended the staircase. They reached the landing where Jonathan lay motionless, face down on the hardwood floor, dressed in gym shorts and socks. The young man's body was riddled with gunshot wounds to his upper torso. Despite the severity of his condition, the medics managed to detect a faint pulse. With urgency, Jonathan was rushed to Botsford Hospital, where a team of medical professionals worked tirelessly to stabilize his condition. However, their efforts ultimately proved futile, and after 30 minutes of intense medical intervention, he was pronounced dead. After the ambulance rushed Jonathan Hoffman to the hospital, police secured Sandra Lane's home as a crime scene. The 3-level residence was a labyrinth of violence and blood, with nearly every room telling a grim tale. Crime scene investigators arrived, meticulously combing the area for clues to unravel the shocking events. As they descended the basement staircase, they were struck by footprints in the blood-stained floor, crucial evidence carefully preserved. Deeper in the house, the team found 10 bullet casings scattered throughout, each one collected and analyzed. One investigator discovered a bullet hole in the drywall, and the search for more evidence led them to the second floor, where a gun case filled with ammunition was found. While gathering evidence, investigators took extra care to photograph Sandra, capturing her face, arms, and hands as she sat in the patrol car. Sandra became overwhelmed, tears streaming down her face. Amidst the chaos, Fred Lane, Sandra's husband, appeared outside the house with their dog, claiming to have been gone for an hour, a walk he took after Sandra asked him to. Fred was stunned to discover that his wife, Sandra Lane, had confessed to shooting and killing their grandson Jonathan after he was pronounced dead at the hospital. The police faced the daunting task of breaking the news to Jonathan's family that their beloved son had been murdered by his own grandmother. As detectives dug deeper into the case, they learned that Jonathan had been living in Michigan, separated from his parents and sister who resided in Arizona. When the detectives shared the devastating news with Jennifer, informing her that her mother had taken the life of her cherished son, she was left in a state of utter disbelief. It seemed unbelievable that someone who was supposed to love and care for their grandchildren could commit such an atrocity. The fact that Jonathan was his grandmother's favorite made the tragedy even more incomprehensible, leaving everyone wondering how he met his end at Sandra's hands. As the day drew to a close, around 7:30 p.m., the police decided to take Sandra Lane to the hospital for a health evaluation, given her advanced age. While waiting in the emergency room, Sandra maintained that Jonathan had never harmed her, describing him as a kind boy who never hurt anyone. After a medical assessment, the doctors cleared Sandra of any suspicious injuries. With this, the police decided to return her to the patrol car and take her to the police department for further questioning. On May 20th, after midnight, Sandra's attorney met her at the police station before she provided her official statement to the police. Seated alongside her attorney, Sandra sought legal counsel when the detectives eventually met with them. Sandra's story took a dramatic turn at the police station. Contradicting her initial statement at the hospital, where she had claimed her grandson was not involved, she now alleged that she and Jonathan had engaged in a heated altercation involving yelling and screaming. During this confrontation, Jonathan had kicked her in the stomach, leaving her fearing for her life. According to Sandra, Jonathan's behavior had become increasingly erratic and angry of late. He would come and go from her house at all hours, frequently bringing over people she didn't care for. Furthermore, Sandra had noticed that valuables had gone missing from her home, leading her to suspect that Jonathan or his friends might be involved in theft. Sandra also mentioned that her grandson had a history of run-ins with the law. Sandra stated that Jonathan was pulled over by an officer while driving, and cannabis was found in his car. However, this didn't deter him, and he was stopped again by an officer shortly after. This time, he was found to be in possession of Adderall. Sandra also recalled an incident where she had to call 911 due to Jonathan's aggressive behavior. During that episode, he was yelling obscene remarks at her. Despite this, when the police arrived, Sandra persuaded them not to arrest him. According to Sandra, she was compelled to buy a gun due to Jonathan's behavior. Sandra alleged that everything escalated on May 18th when she accompanied Jonathan to the probation department due to his non-compliance with his probation terms. After returning home, Sandra stated that Jonathan threatened to take her car, which led to him attacking her. Since there were no witnesses to Jonathan's shooting apart from Sandra, the detectives faced a significant challenge in verifying her account. Sandra claimed self-defense, prompting the detectives to conduct a thorough investigation into the incident. Their primary concern was ensuring they didn't wrongfully send a 74-year-old frail grandmother to prison for defending herself against a violent teenage boy. The detectives examined the photo taken by crime scene investigators immediately after Sandra confessed to shooting Jonathan. However, upon reviewing the evidence, they found no signs of violence on Sandra, not a single scratch, which would be expected if she had indeed been in a physical struggle. During her court arraignment, the judge ruled that Sandra should be held on bond while awaiting trial at the correctional facility. Paul Walton, the prosecutor on the case, believed the 911 call made by Jonathan clashed with Sandra's self-defense claim. Upon listening to the call, Walton noticed a significant 2-minute and 51-second silence before Sandra fired another shot at Jonathan. Based on his observations, it seemed clear that Jonathan was already severely injured and no longer posed an immediate threat to Sandra. However, Sandra's defense team presented a contrasting argument. They countered that Jonathan still posed a threat despite his injuries. The defense highlighted a portion of the 911 call where Sandra yells, "Let go," implying that Jonathan was still attacking his grandmother, even in his injured state. The defense argued that Sandra was simply an innocent and loving grandmother. They pointed to the end of the 911 call, where Sandra can be heard instructing her bleeding grandson to lie down and promising to get him water, as proof of her compassionate nature. According to the defense, these statements revealed Sandra's true character as a caring and empathetic woman. Prosecutor Walton was perplexed by Sandra Lane. Was she a doting grandmother forced to make the ultimate sacrifice in a desperate situation, or a ruthless killer who stalked her own grandson, callously ending his life in the woods? To uncover the truth, Prosecutor Walton conducted a series of interviews around town. The testimonies uniformly portrayed Sandra as an ordinary, kind-hearted grandmother. She regularly visited the local salon, actively participated in her synagogue, taught Sunday school, and volunteered her time. Her generosity and affluence were also well known. What struck the detectives most was the resoundingly positive feedback from those who knew Sandra. They described her as deeply devoted to her grandchildren, particularly Jonathan. The testimony seemed to starkly contradict the heinous act she had confessed to committing. However, a different narrative unfolded when the detectives spoke with Jennifer, Sandra's daughter, and Jonathan's mother. Jennifer offered a contrasting perspective on her mother's character, contradicting the image projected by the community. She described her mother as a controlling and abusive figure, vastly different from the warm and compassionate person others had portrayed. According to Jennifer, her childhood was marked by constant parental fighting, with her mother physically assaulting her on multiple occasions. Her father's frequent absences left Sandra in complete control of the household, allowing her to behave like a tyrant, prone to violent outbursts. Years later, when Sandra remarried Fred Lane, Jennifer witnessed a significant shift in her mother's behavior. Sandra expressed deep affection for Fred, believing him to be a stabilizing influence in their home. Initially, her controlling nature seemed to subside. However, after Jennifer gave birth to Jonathan, Sandra allegedly attempted to reassert her dominance. Jennifer claimed that her mother's obsession with the baby bordered on an unhealthy level, with Sandra becoming so fixated that Jennifer jokingly wondered if she wanted to kidnap the child. After Sandra was charged with murdering her grandson Jonathan, the community of West Bloomfield surprisingly rallied around her. A significant number of residents believed Jonathan was a drug user who got what was coming to him, sparking a wave of support for Sandra. On social media, community members posted messages of encouragement, affectionately referring to her as Granny and using the hashtag #GoGrannyGo. In this narrative, Jonathan was vilified as a monster, while Sandra was portrayed as an innocent, frail, elderly woman. Jennifer revealed that most of her family had bought into Sandra's self-defense story, effectively disowning both Jonathan's memory and herself. Throughout the ordeal, Sandra's husband Fred stood by her side, offering unconditional support. The medical examiner concluded that Jonathan Hoffman's death was a homicide resulting from the multiple gunshot wounds he suffered. An examination of the wounds revealed stippling, indicating that the gun was fired from varying distances. Additionally, a toxicology report revealed the presence of synthetic marijuana, also known as spice, or specifically K2, in Jonathan's system. At the time, spice was widely available in West Bloomfield, particularly among teens and young adults, who could purchase it at gas stations without identification. There were numerous reports of individuals experiencing adverse reactions to the substance, including violent behavior after consumption. 1 month prior to Jonathan's death, a disturbingly similar incident occurred involving another student from the same high school. Michael Cipriano, a classmate of Jonathan's, murdered his father, Robert, after a heated verbal argument. According to reports, Michael was under the influence of the synthetic drug spice at the time of the attack. Jonathan's sister, Jessica, harbored a deep affection for her brother, but she was also aware of his emotional instability and occasional violent outbursts. Despite her reluctance to consider it, she couldn't shake the suspicion that her brother might have harmed their grandmother, leading her to ultimately shoot and kill him. 2 months after her arrest, Sandra was arraigned in circuit court and indicted on 2 additional charges: possession of a firearm and committing a felony. Furthermore, she faced a distinctive charge known as open murder, which is only applicable in select states such as Nevada and Michigan. This unique charge encompasses both first and second-degree murder. Prosecutor Paul Walton was concerned that the jury might hesitate to convict a grandmother of premeditated murder, so he opted to present the jury with a broader range of options. This decision displeased the defense, who felt that the prosecution was shirking their responsibility. In 2013, Sandra Lane faced trial for the murder of her grandson, sparking widespread national outrage. Many directed blame at the boy's mother, Jennifer, for sending him to Michigan to stay with Sandra. Throughout the trial, the defense portrayed Sandra as a devoted and loving grandmother, but the prosecution disputed her claim of self-defense. They presented telling images of Sandra taken after the shooting, highlighting inconsistencies. Her clothes remained unripped, her jewelry was still intact, and her hair was styled as usual. Moreover, bloody footprints found in the basement, matching Sandra's shoes, implied that she had searched for additional ammunition. After the prosecution rested its case, Sandra's defense team presented their argument to bolster their stance. Sandra's attorney took a calculated risk by allowing her to testify on her own behalf. The attorney believed it was crucial for the jury to hear directly from Sandra herself, giving a first-hand account of the experiences she had while living with her grandson Jonathan in the months leading up to his tragic death. According to Sandra, Jonathan had a history of violent outbursts, often kicking in doors and breaking objects. On one occasion, he even shattered a computer monitor. On the day of the incident that ultimately led to Jonathan's death, Sandra alleged that he struck her in the head, leaving her feeling threatened and terrified. As a result, she decided to retrieve her gun, hoping it would serve as a deterrent to protect herself. Her intention, as stated in her testimony, was not to take her grandson's life, but rather to stop him from getting back up and attacking her again. However, during cross-examination by prosecutor Paul Walton, Sandra's account began to unravel. Under Walton's pressure, Sandra conceded that her motivation for obtaining the gun was not fear for her safety, but rather a desire to get Jonathan to listen to her. This admission severely undermined her credibility as a witness and made it increasingly difficult to argue self-defense. Experts testified that the K2 spice found in Jonathan's urine at the time of his death suggested he was not under the influence of the drug when he died. The presence of the drug in his urine indicated that it had already been metabolized, casting doubt on Sandra's claim that Jonathan was high on the drug and violent. After hearing the evidence presented at the trial, the jury deliberated for 2 days before returning a guilty verdict for second-degree murder and the use of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Sandra was subsequently sentenced to 20 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Stephen Freeman. Stephen Andrew Freeman was born on January 1st, 1995, in Thomason, Georgia, to Troy and Jennifer Freeman. He and his brother Blake grew up in a happy and healthy environment with no major issues with their parents or society. Stephen was known for being kind, responsive, and calm, which helped him make many friends. Stephen attended Spalding High School and later studied at Gordon State College in Griffin, Georgia. Mary Catherine Higdon, his future partner, came from a respectable family and was raised with a carefree and humorous spirit. She was creative and enjoyed putting on mini plays for her family and neighbors. Stephen and Mary fell deeply in love during their senior year and remained inseparable. They shared many common interests, including a love for nature, hiking, fishing, and hunting. In 2012, Stephen updated his Facebook status to reflect his relationship with Mary, and the couple frequently posted photos together. Both families accepted each other's children, and after completing their education, the young couple moved in together. Stephen worked as a plumber, while Mary was a teacher's assistant and part-time salesperson. By summer 2018, Stephen and Mary had been living together for 7 years, but they had not yet gotten married. On August 1st, 2018, at 10:42 p.m., Mary called emergency services in a state of panic. She reported that she had accidentally shot her boyfriend while handling a Glock 43 firearm, unaware that it was loaded. When paramedics and police arrived, Mary was in shock, kneeling beside Stephen's motionless body, crying and begging for help. She was eventually pulled away, allowing the officers to examine Stephen and provide first aid. Despite being shot in the chest, Stephen was still breathing and was rushed to Spalding Regional Hospital. Sadly, he died just before midnight. In shock and struggling to comprehend the tragedy, Mary visited the police station to give her account of the events. She claimed that the shot was accidental, explaining that there were always firearms in their home for self-defense, and that Stephen would often leave a pistol on the nightstand before sleep. On the fateful evening in question, Mary Catherine claimed she only intended to hand Stephen the pistol, but it accidentally discharged. She insisted she didn't know the gun was loaded and would never harm Stephen, the love of her life, intentionally. However, investigators discovered signs of a struggle in the kitchen, with food and dishes scattered everywhere. Detectives Adam Trammell and Chris Wilson found Mary's story highly unlikely and decided to investigate further. They questioned Mary again, using pressure tactics to get to the truth. Eventually, Mary confessed to shooting Stephen in anger during an argument. She revealed that she wanted to leave him, and the argument escalated. The investigators recorded the conversation, but unfortunately, most of the recording was lost due to technical issues. Further investigation showed that the pistol couldn't have fired accidentally, as it required a deliberate trigger pull. Moreover, the bullet's trajectory indicated that the pistol was pointed directly at Stephen. The detectives also questioned Mary's behavior, suspecting she was overacting and exaggerating her distress. It was also revealed that Mary worked at a gun store where she received thorough training on handling firearms. This meant she knew how to safely handle the pistol, making the accidental discharge scenario unlikely. The investigation uncovered inconsistencies in Mary's statements, including a claim that she tossed the pistol to Stephen, causing it to discharge. This contradicted her initial statement that she was simply handing him the pistol when it fired. Mary's changing statements worked against her, suggesting she was lying and trying to conceal her guilt. She was detained and charged with multiple crimes, including felony murder and aggravated assault. During the trial, Lieutenant Wilson disputed Mary's claim of an accident, instead arguing that she had planned and executed the crime deliberately. A key piece of evidence was the presence of cooking grease on the pistol's slide, which Mary explained was due to her preparing dinner for Stephen that evening. Friends and relatives of the couple described their complicated and tumultuous relationship, marked by frequent arguments and instances of Mary threatening to harm Stephen or herself with a weapon. Despite the complexities of the case, the evidence ultimately pointed to Mary's guilt. Stephen and Mary Catherine had a tumultuous relationship, with many weapons present in their home. 2 days before the tragedy on July 30, 2018, they exchanged warm messages wishing each other a good day. However, the next day, Stephen told his mother he wouldn't return home to that devil and stayed at his friend Thomas's place. On August 1, 2018, when Stephen didn't come home, Mary sent him hundreds of messages begging him to return. She prepared dinner and waited for him, later learning he was at Thomas's place and going to pick him up. They encountered each other on the road, and Mary shouted that she was waiting for him at home for dinner. Stephen replied that he was coming home. However, the evening ended in tragedy instead of a reconciliatory dinner. The police initially believed the case was a premeditated act driven by Mary's anger, but her defense team revealed a different side to their relationship. At her trial on June 17, 2019, Mary Catherine Higdon refused a plea deal for life imprisonment, insisting she couldn't harm Stephen because he was the love of her life. Mary claimed the incident was an accident and that she loved Stephen. She also accused him of abusive behavior, stating that he hit her twice and forced himself on her on the day of the tragedy. Friends and relatives testified that Mary was furious because Stephen often ignored her messages and calls. On the night of the incident, Stephen refused to eat the dinner Mary had prepared, which was the final straw for her. She couldn't hold back and fired at him. The prosecution presented physical evidence, including grease on the pistol and a sheet with bloodstains, showing that Stephen was not attacking Mary, but was sitting still on the bed when she shot him. In court, Mary finally gave a truthful testimony, describing Stephen as a harsh and controlling tyrant who had repeatedly hit, shaken, and threatened her. She confessed that he had constantly controlled and manipulated her, driving her to despair with unreasonable jealousy. The defense presented ample evidence to support her claims, including text messages that raised questions about who was the real tyrant and betrayer in the relationship. Stephen's message snippets suggested that he had insulted Mary Catherine and threatened her. However, what really sparked his anger was more disturbing. According to his friends, Stephen was furious with his girlfriend because he believed she had been unfaithful, which Mary denied. Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen had assaulted her twice before, and she feared he would hurt her again on August 1, 2018. That's why she took action in self-defense. The defense presented an expert and close relatives of Mary who could testify to the domestic violence. Mary's sister, Sarah Higdon, confirmed that she saw bruises on Mary's arm 2 weeks before the shooting, though she regrets not taking a photo and initially believing Mary's explanation that the bruises were accidental. A tearful Mary Higdon told the jury that on the night of the incident, she decided to end things with Stephen once and for all, telling him to leave the house. Stephen became enraged, attacked her, and in self-defense, she grabbed the pistol from the nightstand, accidentally firing it. After Mary Catherine gave emotional testimony, the prosecution and defense teams clashed with Stephen's former friends, who had been close to Mary for years, as they tried to portray their deceased friend in a positive light. Thomas Skinner, Stephen's best friend, described Stephen as a loyal and hard-working country boy, while portraying Mary Catherine as an obsessive and possessive girlfriend who constantly controlled and stalked him. According to Thomas, Mary Catherine and Stephen's relationship had become toxic over time, with Mary threatening to end her life whenever Stephen tried to leave her. He also claimed that during an argument, Mary had once pointed a pistol at her head in front of Stephen. Another witness, Alicia Varela, who worked with Stephen, testified that Mary would obsessively call Stephen throughout the day, even when he was at work. However, during her court testimony, Mary omitted a crucial detail that prosecutor Kate Lenhard highlighted. While Mary described their interactions and how their relationship had deteriorated into physical abuse, she never mentioned the moment when she claimed to have acted in self-defense and pulled the trigger. Prosecutor Kate Lenhard was skeptical of Mary's admission, pointing out that during cross-examination, Mary never mentioned being mistreated by Stephen. Lenhard repeatedly asked Mary if a woman who felt safe at home would confront her attacker late at night and bring him back home, but Mary's response was unconvincing. Lenhard then recreated the events of the accidental shooting as she believed they occurred. According to her version, Stephen came home, and after listening to Mary, they got into an argument because he refused to eat dinner. Enraged, Mary threw the prepared food around the kitchen. Stephen tried to avoid further conflict by going to the bedroom and sitting on the bed, likely waiting for Mary to calm down. However, Mary was determined to confront him, calling out to him twice without getting a response. She then entered the bedroom and shot Stephen in the left side of his neck. Kate Lenhard pointed out the inconsistencies in Stephen Freeman's stories during police interrogations and court hearings, highlighting the contradictions in his accounts. Mary Catherine Higdon provided an emotional testimony about the alleged abuse she suffered at the hands of Stephen Freeman. However, before handing the case over to the jury, Kate Lenhard urged them to consider the possibility that Mary Higdon was not acting in self-defense, but rather was a mastermind of manipulation. The prosecution presented additional evidence and counter-arguments despite the lost confession recording. A forensic examination showed that Stephen Freeman was sitting on the bed at the time of the shooting, making it impossible for him to have been attacking Mary Higdon. Furthermore, while Mary claimed that the gun was always kept unloaded, detectives suspected that the pistol was actually loaded on the evening of August 1, 2018, when Mary was preparing a rope for Stephen. Here's a clearer explanation. The presence of grease marks on the slide and inside the pistol led investigators to suspect that Mary Catherine might have loaded the pistol beforehand. However, Those who knew Stephen Freeman, including colleagues, neighbors, family, friends, and acquaintances, consistently described him as non-aggressive. Meanwhile, Mary Catherine changed her story at least 10 times during the investigation, which prosecutors attributed to fear. Mary Catherine rejected a plea deal because she was facing a potential death sentence. As the jury deliberated, they heard from all the witnesses and the accused. After just 10 minutes, the jury was ready to deliver their verdict, but 2 jurors had lingering doubts about the prosecution's case. These jurors felt that the investigators, in their eagerness to charge Mary Catherine with premeditated murder, had overlooked crucial facts. They were particularly concerned that the prosecution had failed to thoroughly investigate Stephen Freeman's phone, including his text messages and browsing history. Ultimately, the only significant evidence against Mary Catherine was her own lies, which weren't enough to prove her guilt. The jurors' arguments, particularly those of Victor and Chris, had a significant impact. After deliberating, the jury returned a unanimous verdict of not guilty, freeing Mary Catherine Higdon after a lengthy process. The 12 jurors reached the following conclusions. They found the defendant not guilty on the first charge of malicious action and the second charge of serious action. The judge subsequently acquitted Mary Catherine Higdon of all charges, including intentional action, reckless action, assault with a deadly weapon, and carrying a weapon during the commission of a crime. The verdict shocked many in the courtroom, including Jennifer Freeman, who struggled to contain her anger towards the jurors. Those supporting Stephen's family were also stunned by the outcome. Following her acquittal, Mary Catherine returned home to Griffin to be with her family. Since then, she has maintained a low profile, avoiding social media to evade unwanted media and public attention. Mary Catherine's Instagram profile is private, and there is no information available about her current location. It is believed that she has moved on from her difficult past and is now living a quiet, private life. Stephen Freeman's mother paid tribute to her son on social media, remembering him as a kind and loving person. He lived a life full of love, joy, and friendship, and everyone who knew him considered him a friend. He especially cherished the relationships he made while hunting and fishing. Stephen had a special way of showing love and care to those around him. He made people feel seen and heard, often making them laugh until they cried. He was always smiling, hugging, and staying close. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ronell Burns. Kiana was born on September 15, 1977, in St. Louis, Missouri. After graduating from Riverview Garden High School, she attended St. Louis Community College in Florissant Valley, where she studied cosmetology. She soon turned her passion into a successful business, opening her own beauty salon, which became popular thanks to her hard work and dedication. Over the next 20 years, Kiana's salon grew to become one of the largest in the St. Louis area, a testament to her persistence and entrepreneurial spirit. However, her personal life was not without its challenges. Despite her success, Kiana struggled to find a suitable partner until she met her future husband, Ronell Burns, at the age of 44. Prior to meeting Ronell, Kiana had 3 children from previous relationships, whom she loved deeply. Her family and friends describe her as a loving mother, supportive friend, and accomplished businesswoman. Ronell Burns was born on May 14, 1975, in St. Louis, Missouri. He graduated from the High School of Fashion in 1994, where he excelled in basketball and competed for a state championship. Ronell was driven, ambitious, and passionate about competition, always striving for greatness. Before meeting Kiana, Ronell had 2 children from a previous relationship. When they met, they brought together their strong work ethics and ambition, creating a new, happy family. On September 13, 2012, Ronell and Kiana got married in a beautiful wedding surrounded by relatives and friends. After the wedding, Kiana discovered a new side of Ronell. It turned out that Ronell had dedicated his life to Jesus Christ at a young age and wanted to serve the Lord. He began helping anyone he could, including people he met on the street. Ronell even created a website where he coached and preached to spread his message. Ronell believed that God spoke to him in his early years, instructing him to help others. He interpreted one of these calls to mean that sometimes God chooses to communicate with everyone, and only He can allow certain events to occur in life. Ronell pursued his ministry, and his video messages gained immense popularity online. In addition to his impactful work as a church coach, Ronell was a financial counselor and insurance agent. He founded Traditional Financial Solutions, a company dedicated to helping people worldwide achieve financial independence. Ronell achieved great success in his business and humanitarian efforts, and his speeches drew large crowds. His wife, Kiana, supported him, and together they gained popularity online. Ronell was already well established as a leader and coach in the Six-Figure Ambition program, an online initiative for entrepreneurs. He had a substantial following on social media, with over 7,000 fond followers on Instagram and 2,000 subscribers on his educational YouTube channel. By combining their business skills and family values, Ronell and Kiana Burns created something remarkable that positively impacted thousands of people. Kiana was a motivational speaker who shared her insights on success at business events. She also had a strong online presence, with 14,000 followers on Instagram, where she posted about her family life and inspiring quotes. In a popular video message, Kiana and her partner appeared dressed in luxury brands, talking about the benefits of entrepreneurship on their lives and those of their thousands of subscribers. The couple emphasized that their goal is to teach their audience how to become successful entrepreneurs and build a solid business foundation. They urged young entrepreneurs to stop wasting their hard-earned money and instead invest it wisely to generate passive income. Their message concluded with the belief that anyone can achieve greatness, not by being great from the start, but by taking the first step towards it. In the Burns family, only Kiana has achieved the success that Ronell often talks about. She has worked hard to build and operate a network of salons on her own, and was also a successful insurance agent. Her business generated most of the family's income. Ronell, on the other hand, focused on projecting an image of wealth, often posting photos of the family in expensive clothes and at fancy restaurants. Meanwhile, the wealthy and successful individuals took action, while poor people were drawn to the Burns family's enticing stories of making big money without effort. Ronell received a lot of attention from outsiders because everyone wants to become rich. He eventually founded a company with ambitious six-figure goals, allowing him to continue building his wealth and creating his own legacy, which he frequently boasted about in interviews. The Burns had built a close-knit family unit, and to outsiders it seemed like they were living the perfect life. Ronell and Kiana, both successful in their careers, were inspirations to many, and their children, Rhea, Makai, and Ray Haley, were a big part of their lives. However, beneath the surface, trouble was brewing. Ronell suggested that Kiana leave her hometown of St. Louis and move to Atlanta, a decision that didn't sit well with her. Despite their 3 children together, Kiana was forced to make the move, as Ronell had plans to expand their business. Kiana put on a brave face and pretended to be happy with the decision, but deep down, she was reluctant to leave St. Louis. On social media, she presented a perfect picture of her life, posting photos of the luxurious gifts she received from Ronell, such as a Maserati Levant car and her collection of Louis Vuitton bags. She would accompany these posts with captions expressing her gratitude and admiration for her husband. Like many social media influencers, Kiana also frequently posted about her family and children, painting a rosy picture of her life. Kiana, a woman who appeared to have a perfect life, revealed to her audience that everything wasn't as smooth as it seemed. In reality, she and her partner were on the brink of divorce after moving to Atlanta. This left Kiana alone in a new city, where she had to start from scratch. In a heartfelt video message, Kiana opened up to her subscribers about the challenges she faced when deciding to move and adapt to a new home and people. She emphasized that adjusting to new environments and people without the support of loved ones can be incredibly tough. Kiana also shared her struggles with mental health, expressing concerns about not being strong enough to overcome life's challenges. However, the question remains, was the move to Atlanta the primary reason for the imbalance in her family, or were there other underlying factors at play? In a speech, Kiana refused to mention that the real reason for the problems in their relationship was Ronald's infidelity and promiscuity, which he had kept hidden from their seemingly perfect life on social media. Later that night, Kiana posted a video of herself happily dancing at home with one of her daughters. However, a few hours later, the situation took a tragic turn. Kiana and Ronald got into a long and intense argument, which ended with Kiana grabbing a gun, shooting Ronell, and then herself. By the time the police arrived, neighbors had already gathered outside the Burns' home, reporting that they had heard gunshots coming from inside. The investigation initially suggested that Ronald Burns had taken his own life. But the discovery of Kiana's body in the next room with a gun in her hand revealed that she was the one who had made the fatal decision. While it was clear that Kiana had killed her husband, some people believed that she had been driven to do so after discovering his infidelity. Others thought that the couple's severe debt and Ronell's con artist tendencies had led to the tragic event. As people dug deeper into the couple's lives, they uncovered some revealing information from Ronell's ex-wife. She disclosed that during their divorce, she had learned that Ronell was a habitual cheater and had been reckless with her finances, leading to a ruined credit history and failed jobs. Ronell had then met Kiana, a successful career woman who was drawn to his confidence and charisma. Ronald, in turn, was attracted to Kiana's wealth, and the two seemed like a winning combination. However, their business ventures ultimately failed, leaving only Kiana's beauty salon intact. Despite this, Ronald continued to pretend to be a successful businessman, convincing others of his non-existent achievements. The Burns family presented a false image on social media, showcasing lavish purchases and happy relationships to conceal their severe financial struggles. Ronald posted about his business ventures, claiming he could turn any idea into a profitable success. Behind the facade of a devout Christian couple, they shared Bible quotes and scripture in their posts. They flaunted their luxurious lifestyle, posting photos of their homes, parties, and vacations, creating an illusion of wealth. However, this was all a ruse to hide their true circumstances. Unbeknownst to their followers, Ronell worked for a fraudulent American marketing insurance company that preyed on middle and lower-income families, exploiting them for financial gain. He even tried to recruit his own family and friends to join the scheme, seeking to boost his status. Despite his efforts, Ronell failed to generate enough income from the company and struggled to support himself. The Burns couple pretended to be prosperous entrepreneurs, convincing those around them of their success, and even creating a TV show, Meet the Burns, to showcase their supposedly lavish lifestyle. However, their arrogance blinded them to their financial reality, and they spent all their earnings on luxuries, trying to be someone they were not. This reckless spending ultimately led to their downfall and bankruptcy. On December 19, 2019, Kiana and Ronell Burns officially filed for bankruptcy and had to sell some of their assets to pay their debts. Despite their financial troubles, Ronell and Kiana continued to present a false image of a happy family and successful business. But it became increasingly difficult to maintain this facade in St. Louis. Ronell, seeking to further his fraudulent activities, convinced his family to relocation to a larger city. This decision would prove to be yet another mistake. Despite their thriving business being their sole source of income, Kiana reluctantly agreed to the move. However, Kiana struggled to adjust to life in Atlanta. She was already aware of Ronell's repeated infidelities and had grown tired of her patient and silent nature. the couple jointly decided to divorce, but in the divorce papers filed on October 10, 2021, Ronell deceitfully cited Kiana's infidelity as the reason. Devastated, Kiana understood Ronell's motives were to maintain his public image, as their friends and family were unaware of the couple's troubles. Ronell sought to conceal the truth from the public, but on October 20th, 10 days after the divorce filing, Kiana publicly addressed a serious matter on live TV, her usual bright smile replaced by a concerned and sorrowful expression. After divorcing his first wife, Ronell Burns remarried a successful and wealthy woman named Kiana, adopting the persona of a devout guru to hide his true nature. He continued to exploit his new wife's trust and wealth, pretending to be a successful businessman. However, their seemingly perfect marriage was a facade. On November 9, 2021, Kiana shot and killed her husband Ronell before taking her own life. The Sandy Springs Police Department reported that no one else was present at the time of the incident. The tragic event left 8 children without parents. Despite the shocking turn of events, there was no record of domestic violence at their Atlanta home. In the weeks leading up to the incident, Kiana had asked her Facebook friends to pray for her, hinting at deeper struggles. The exact reasons behind her actions remain unknown. It's difficult to judge someone's decisions when they are struggling with depression and other mental health issues. The tragedy is compounded by the fact that 8 children are now left without parents, forced to navigate the world on their own. News of Ronell Burns and his wife Kiana's passing has spread quickly through their large social circle. Their deaths have been widely shared on social media, with many friends and acquaintances expressing sadness and sharing stories about the couple. Even those closest to them have paid tribute, although one friend's post revealed that few people knew the truth about the family until the end. Ronell Burns was known for flaunting his wealth and success, which often masks insecurity. He became so convinced of his own importance that he lost sight of reality. He ruined the lives of multiple successful women, misleading them with false promises of happiness and success. People like him have no self-respect or dignity. He's a con artist who preyed on his wives, deceiving them with fairy tales of eternal love and happiness. Unfortunately, he was able to manipulate them by playing on their Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Amato family. Margaret and Chad Robert Amato got married in the mid-1900s. At the time, Margaret had a 3-year-old son named Jason from a previous marriage. Chad was not deterred by this and was willing to raise Jason as his own. They had 2 more sons, Grant and Cody. Grant was very shy and found it difficult to make friends, so he relied on his brothers for companionship. As he grew up, Grant remained modest and introverted, still struggling to connect with his peers. After their eldest brother Jason left home, Grant became especially close to Cody. The 2 brothers pursued medical degrees together and eventually became anesthesiologists. However, Grant often made mistakes and needed Cody to double-check his work. In August 2018, Cody took a break from work and decided to travel the world for a change of scenery. He dreamed of visiting Japan and invited Grant and their best friend, Jeremy, to join him on the journey. Grant became fixated on a mysterious webcam model named Sylvie, aka Sylvia Vanessa Lavova from Bulgaria, after meeting her on a website where he paid for private online interactions with various women. He began to believe that Sylvie genuinely cared for him and that they could have a real relationship. To ensure her loyalty, Grant spent thousands of dollars daily and showered her with expensive gifts such as lingerie and jewelry, which she would wear during their video calls. Desperate to impress Sylvie, Grant fabricated stories and lost touch with reality. He lied about living alone in a large house, owning a successful business, and having the ability to lavish her with money. To back up his claims, Grant sent her large sums of money, starting with a few thousand, then $10,000, and eventually $100,000 as a birthday gift. Grant's excessive spending from his parents, Accounts eventually caught their attention. At first, he claimed it was for his online project, but Chad and Margaret soon realized he was lying. This led to a major family argument, with his father demanding he leave the house immediately. However, his mother and Cody intervened on his behalf. The family recognized that Grant was struggling with severe internet addiction. Yet they were shocked to discover that he had spent nearly $200,000 from their accounts. A search of his room revealed vials of potent substances, which Grant claimed he used to cope with the emotional strain. His parents decided to cut off his access to their accounts and planned to send him to a rehabilitation clinic for treatment of his drug and internet addictions. Feeling desperate, Grant threatened to end his life. He stormed out of the house, got into his car, and sped away. It was later discovered that Grant had driven to his aunt and uncle's house, damaging their fence and garage wall in the process. His relatives, aware of the turmoil within the Amato family, took pity on him and offered him a place to stay until things calmed down. Grant's parents asked him to stop seeing Sylvie, but he didn't listen. Instead, he stole thousands of dollars from his kind relatives to pay for his interactions with her. When his aunt found out, she told his parents, who promised to handle the situation and get the stolen money back if she didn't call the police. Chad, Grant's father, went to the relative's house and took Grant, who desperately needed help. Chad, along with Margaret and Cody, realized that talking to Grant wasn't working and that if he left home, he would likely steal again. So, they gave him an ultimatum. Either he would go to a rehab clinic to get treatment for his addiction, or he would face jail time for theft. Grant reluctantly agreed to enter the clinic, where he would spend 2 months away from temptations. Grant was admitted to a medical institution in December 2018 to receive treatment for his drug and internet addictions. While he was in treatment, his parents accessed his computer and were shocked to discover that he had been spending thousands of dollars a day from their family accounts on a woman named Sylvie. They found intimate online interactions between Grant and Sylvie, which Grant had recorded and repeatedly watched. Grant's parents decided to contact Sylvie and inform her that the man who had been showering her with gifts and money was not a successful businessman, but rather an unemployed addict who had stolen the funds from his family. They warned Sylvie that Grant could face criminal charges for his actions. However, Sylvie was unmoved, viewing her interactions with Grant as simply a job and refusing to return the stolen money. On January 5, 2019, Grant suddenly returned home from treatment, having completed less than a quarter of the rehabilitation program. He had fled the clinic, where he had shown complete non-compliance with the program. Grant tearfully promised to turn his life around and get a job, but threatened to end his life if his parents forced him to return to the rehab center. His parents agreed to let him stay home, but only under strict conditions. Grant was on a tight leash, no computer use, a strict daily routine, and close monitoring of his earnings. To help him get back on track, he was given a part-time job at a local grocery warehouse, which he held for about 3 weeks. Grant appeared to be cooperative, leading his parents to believe he had overcome his addictions and matured. However, on Thursday, January 24, 2019, Grant convinced his mother to let him use the laptop for a short time to check his email and post his resume online, hoping to find a better job than his current warehouse position. Margaret trusted her son and allowed him to use the laptop, a decision that would prove to be a critical mistake. As soon as Grant got online, he tried to contact Sylvie, but he discovered that his parents had already exposed the truth about him to her. Feeling betrayed, Grant believed his parents had humiliated him in front of the only woman he loved, and he sought revenge. Grant's anger turned deadly when he remembered the guns his family kept at home. While his father had locked the main collection in a safe, Grant knew about another loaded gun kept in his parents' bedroom. This was the gun he decided to use to take brutal revenge on his family. Grant's mother was working on the computer in the home office when her youngest son, Grant, sneaked up behind her and shot her in the back of the head. She didn't even have time to turn around or realize what was happening. Next, Grant waited for his father to come home from work. As soon as he walked into the kitchen, Grant shot him twice in the chest. Grant then thought of an even more sinister plan. He decided to blame his own brother, Cody, who had always been supportive and helpful towards him, and was his best friend. Cody had moved out of the family home and was living with his girlfriend. Grant used his deceased father's phone to send Cody messages, telling him to come home right away because something terrible had happened. Grant gave his brother only a little information, trusting it would be enough to make him leave work immediately. Grant was right. Cody rushed home from work, even leaving early. As soon as Cody entered the house, he made his way to the bottom of the staircase that led to the second floor. But before he could go any further, he was shot and fell to the ground. Cody didn't die right away. He had time to understand the terrible situation he was in, but he was unable to do anything to change it. Grant murdered his family and then carefully covered his tracks. He wiped his fingerprints from the pistol, placed it in his brother's hand to frame him, and left it next to the bodies to make it seem like Cody had killed their parents and then taken his own life. Grant then calmly packed his belongings, downloaded incriminating video files from the computer, and even sent a text to Sylvie to tie up loose ends. He loaded his essentials into the car and drove away. However, the police quickly tracked him down and arrested him at a small motel in Orange County just over a day later. Grant was more disappointed than surprised, but he vehemently denied any involvement during his interrogation. Grant fabricated outlandish stories about his father's alleged cruelty towards him, his mother, and brother, claiming his father tried to keep him apart from his girlfriend Sylvie, whom he claimed to truly love. His account of the events on the evening of January 24, 2019, was confusing, inconsistent, and lacked credibility. Grant claimed that his brother Cody got into a fight with their father, grabbed a gun, and accidentally killed Chad and Margaret. However, Grant wasn't present during the incident and only pieced together the events based on what he thought might have happened. Grant said he was kicked out of the house by his father and spent the night in his car. The next morning, he drove away without knowing what had occurred at home. However, his story had many inconsistencies and didn't add up. The evidence suggested that Grant was the one who had killed his family members. As a result, Grant was arrested and charged with the murder of his father, brother, and Margaret. He was held in custody on a $750,000 bond, which he couldn't afford to pay. The trial began on July 15, 2019. Almost all the witnesses who testified, including Grant's brother Jason, relatives, and Cody's friend Jeremy, spoke against Grant. Those who knew him described Grant as a person with addiction problems, a compulsive liar, and a thief. He had even stolen money from Jeremy during their trip to Japan. The key evidence against Grant was a large bank transfer from his brother Chad's account to his own younger son's account, which took place late at night after the family members had been murdered. To authorize the transfer, Grant had used the finger of his deceased father to bypass the account's biometric identification system. The prosecution sought the death penalty, arguing that Grant's actions were premeditated and heinous. However, the defense claimed that Grant was mentally ill and required treatment rather than punishment. On August 12, 2019, the court delivered its verdict, finding 30-year-old Grant Amato guilty of 3 premeditated murders. As a result, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Paige Bergfeld. After high school, Paige attended the University of Florida's nursing school, where she met Howard Bigler. They started dating after realizing their mutual feelings for each other. After graduating with a nursing degree, Paige returned to Colorado to live with her family. In 1995, she and Howard got married. At first, They seemed like a happy couple, sharing many common interests and views. However, they had a significant disagreement that eventually led to their divorce. Paige wanted to have a child and start a family, but Howard didn't share her desire. This issue caused frequent arguments and discussions, but they couldn't find a compromise. In 1997, they decided to divorce. Despite this, they remained friends due to their strong connection. Paige later married Rob Dixon, but that marriage also ended in divorce. After her second divorce, Paige reconnected with Howard. He claimed to be one of the last people to see her alive. On the 28th, Howard and Paige, who were previously married, met in Eagle County, Colorado, to attend to personal matters. They spent Thursday together, after which they returned to their separate homes. Following their meeting, they continued to stay in touch through phone calls. Later, when Paige went missing, Howard quickly reached out to emergency services to report his concerns. During the call, he expressed his deep worry and belief that something terrible might have happened to her. Howard mentioned that Paige was a devoted mother who would never abandon her children without a valid reason. A recording of the call confirmed this, and cell tower data verified that Howard was in the Denver, Colorado area on the day Paige disappeared, which is a significant distance from where she was last seen. This evidence led the police to rule Howard out as a suspect. The investigation then focused on Paige's relationship with her second husband, Rob Dixon, and uncovered several suspicious incidents that required further investigation. Paige had previously reported her husband Rob to the police twice for harassment during their marriage. Before marrying Rob, Paige worked at a strip club in Denver, where she met him. Rob came from a wealthy family and had inherited a significant fortune. The two fell in love and got married in 1998. The couple settled in a luxurious home in Colorado, where Paige realized her dream of becoming a mother. Within a few years, they had 3 children who became the center of Paige's life. The early years of their marriage seemed happy, with the couple enjoying a luxurious lifestyle. However, things took a turn for the worse due to Rob's financial difficulties. Rob's family businesses faced severe issues, leading to a significant decline in their economic situation. As a result, Rob was forced to file for bankruptcy, which triggered a deep family crisis. By 2004, tensions had escalated to the point where Paige called emergency services twice. The first time, she reported that Rob had threatened to kill her and their children, but when the police arrived, they claimed to have resolved their issues. A year later, Paige reported Rob for assaulting her while she was holding their youngest child. Rob was arrested and charged with third-degree assault. He eventually pleaded guilty to 1 count of molestation, but the trial was dismissed and he avoided jail time. The couple's relationship continued to deteriorate, leading them to separate. Rob then moved to Pennsylvania. During the investigation into Paige's disappearance, Rob was interviewed to establish his alibi for that day. He claimed to have been at home and could not have harmed her. The investigators could not find any evidence to implicate Rob in her disappearance. In fact, Rob actively participated in the search for Paige. The investigating officers left no stone unturned in their effort to find clues and solve the mystery of the missing mother. The investigation into Paige's disappearance began with a thorough examination of her car. It was hoped that evidence in the car could help locate her or provide clues about what had happened. Sergeant Weiler of the County Sheriff's Department noted that arson is often used to destroy evidence, but in this case, the examination of the vehicle yielded valuable information. The driver's seat was found to be pushed back as far as it would go, indicating that the last person to drive the car was a tall individual, inconsistent with Paige's short stature. The trunk of the car contained Paige's notebook, with pages torn out from June 26 to June 29. As time passed, the search for Paige became increasingly urgent. A break in the case came when a driver stopped on a highway southeast of town to fix a flat tire and discovered a checkbook lying nearby. He reported it to the authorities, who then searched the area and found additional items belonging to Page, including medical records and insurance cards. Sergeant Weiler's investigation into Page Bergfeld's disappearance took a dramatic turn when he found a business card on the road, leading him to a shocking discovery. Page was secretly working as an escort under the alias Carrie. This revelation completely upended the investigation, as it revealed a side of Page's life that her loved ones knew nothing about. Previously, it was believed that Page was a devoted mother who worked hard to provide for her children after her divorce. She had started her own children's clothing business, taught dance lessons, and sold kitchen supplies. Despite her busy schedule, she always made time for her children and was actively involved in their school activities. However, the discovery of the secret phone Page used for her escort work revealed a completely different picture. This phone became a crucial piece of evidence, leading police to unravel a complex mystery that was far more sinister than anyone had initially suspected. The investigation into Page's disappearance led to more questions than answers. What prompted a responsible mother and successful businesswoman to lead a secret life? And how was this double life connected to her vanishing? These questions took center stage in the investigation, adding a new layer of mystery. To get to the bottom of things, detectives analyzed Page's cell phone, found in her car, and examined her contacts and calls from the hours leading up to her disappearance. The last call made from her phone was on June 28th around 9 p.m. This analysis led investigators to identify 7 suspects, one of whom was Lester Ralph Jones. Jones's criminal record raised red flags, particularly his history of violence against women and a previous kidnapping conviction that earned him a 5-year prison sentence. However, it wasn't the only concerning aspect. Jones's white car matched the description of the vehicle seen by Carol, Page's friend. Carol shared a crucial detail with detectives. Page had once approached her car, only to find a white car blocking her driveway. Enraged, Page got behind the wheel to turn around, but the cars collided. The unknown driver quickly fled the scene. Investigators suspected that Lester might have been obsessed with Page and was stalking her after discovering that he had tried to book an appointment with her for intimate services on the day before she vanished. When questioned, Lester denied any involvement in her disappearance and provided fingerprints and DNA samples. However, a search of his home turned up several incriminating items, including a prepaid phone, wigs, Viagra, a sheet with an escort services phone number, and women's lingerie in various sizes. The prepaid phone caught the investigators' attention due to suspicious calls made to Page's phone on the day she disappeared. Lester initially denied owning a second phone, which proved to be a lie. Using the phone's packaging found at his home, police traced the purchase to a supermarket on North Avenue. The store's security footage showed Lester buying the phone, which he refused to acknowledge when confronted with the evidence. Lester Jones became the main suspect in Page's disappearance, but the police couldn't find enough concrete evidence to charge him. They continued to investigate and search for Page's body, hoping to find proof of his guilt. However, the case stalled for several years, leaving Page's family and loved ones in a state of unbearable grief. As time passed, the search seemed increasingly futile, and the hope of finding Page alive began to fade. In 2012, a hiker stumbled upon human remains in a ravine in Delta County, surprisingly close to where Page's personal belongings had been found 5 years prior. Investigators were nearly certain the body was that of a young mother, and DNA testing confirmed it was indeed Page. Unfortunately, her story ended in tragedy. The condition of the body made it impossible to determine the exact cause of death, but it was clear she had suffered a brutal beating with multiple broken bones, particularly in her face. It was concluded that her injuries ultimately led to her death. The discovery of Page's body added a horrific layer to the story. It's believed that her body was buried, but years of soil erosion eventually brought it to the surface, which may explain why it wasn't found sooner. The discovery led to a breakthrough in Lester Ralph Jones's case, which had stalled for years. In November 2014, he was charged with kidnapping, first-degree murder, and second-degree murder. The trial finally began in July 2016 and lasted 22 days. Prosecutors claimed that Lester's frustration over being unable to see Paige, combined with his history of violence against women, motivated the crime. The prosecution's key witness, Lester's ex-wife Lisa, testified about his violent past. She described how Lester kidnapped and threatened to kill her at gunpoint in the late 1990s after she ended their relationship. On one occasion, he attacked her and her partner, shooting the latter in the head. A month later, Lester made another threat, warning her that she would be thrown into a lake. Lisa managed to escape and contacted the police, leading to Lester's arrest on charges of kidnapping and assault. In contrast, Lester's defense attorneys argued that the police had wrongly accused an innocent man and suggested that other clients of Paige's may have had motives for the crime. However, they failed to provide convincing evidence linking anyone else to the murder. Lester's current wife testified, stating that although her husband used an escort service, her faith prevented her from leaving him. Nevertheless, she could not provide an alibi for him and identified him in a supermarket surveillance video where he bought a disposable phone. Lester's first trial ended in a mistrial on September 9, 2016, when the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict. However, the district attorney was convinced of Lester's guilt and continued to investigate and re-examine the evidence. After several weeks, on November 21, 2016, the jury finally reached a verdict, finding Lester guilty of all charges related to Paige's death. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Lester's defense team appealed the sentence, but an appeals court panel upheld the conviction and sentence in June 2022. Paige's funeral was held on April 28, 2012. Her obituary remembered her as a beautiful and radiant woman with a smile that lit up the room. Her tragic death has had a lasting impact on her family and friends, leaving her 3 children without their loving mother and support. The tragic case of Paige captured the nation's attention and spanned many years, but through the unwavering dedication of law enforcement relatives, justice was finally served. Lester Ralph Jones was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, ensuring he can no longer harm innocent people. Paige's courageous story stands as a powerful reminder of the significance of persisting in the pursuit of justice, no matter how long and arduous the journey may be. Her memory will forever be cherished by those who knew and loved. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lauren Burke. Lauren Ashley Burke was born on December 30th, 1989 in Marietta, Georgia, to James Burke and Vivian Gershon, who later divorced. She had 2 siblings, Jacqueline and Chad Burke. After high school, Lauren attended Auburn University, where she studied graphic design and was an active member of the Delta Gamma sorority. She also played lacrosse and was involved in various campus activities. Her friends described her as a friendly, excellent student who was always smiling, happy, and helpful. Lauren started dating Sean McQuaid while still in high school, and they continued their relationship when they both enrolled at Auburn University. At that time, education was their top priority, but they still made plans for their future together. Tragically, on March 4, 2008, she began the day by having breakfast with Sean at a cafe at 11 a.m. She then attended class and called her father, James, to discuss plans for spring break and a dentist appointment. After finishing her conversation with her father, Lauren visited her friend Sean in his dorm room, where she stayed until the evening. At 8:30 p.m., she had a planned study session with her classmate Michael at the library. When Lauren left Sean's room around 8 p.m., it was already dark outside. She got into her car, a black 2001 Honda Civic, which was parked in the lot next to the dorm. This was the last time Sean saw her. Michael waited for Lauren at the library, but she didn't show up. He started calling her cell phone, but she didn't answer. He kept calling and eventually got through to her. Lauren told him she had forgotten about their appointment and hung up. About an hour later, at 9 p.m., a 911 call was made, reporting an injured girl lying on the roadside near the Farmville Baptist Church and Route 280 on the 147 freeway. Lauren was lying in the middle of the road, taking slow, deep breaths because she was suffocating. She had many injuries on her body and was only wearing socks on her feet. The traffic in both directions was blocked because drivers had stopped their cars in the roadway to help her. At 9:12 p.m., the police arrived, but Lauren was already unconscious. A few minutes later, paramedics came and found that Lauren's pulse was very weak as they loaded her into the ambulance. She was taken to East Alabama Medical Center at 9:35 p.m., where doctors started trying to save her life. Around the same time, at 9:27 p.m., multiple people called 911 to report a car on fire on the Auburn University campus. Firefighters and police were sent to the scene, but they couldn't find the owner of the burning car among the students who had come out of their dorms to see the fire. When the police checked the license plate, they found out that the car belonged to James Burke, a resident of Georgia. But what they didn't know was that James Burke is Lauren's father. The police called James and learned that the burned-out Honda actually belonged to his daughter Lauren, who is a student at Auburn University. James was frantic to know what was happening with his daughter, but the police couldn't give him any information. They didn't know where Lauren was and claimed no one was in the burned-out car. James tried calling Lauren's cell phone, but she didn't answer, which only made him more anxious. Desperate for news, James reached out to his daughter's friends, but none of them knew anything about her whereabouts or the car fire. He then contacted his ex-wife, Vivian, Lauren's mother, hoping she might know something, but she was also in the dark. Vivian called Lauren's boyfriend, Sean, at 9:40 p.m. to inform him that Lauren was missing and her car had been burned. Sean started making calls to their mutual friends to see if anyone had seen Lauren that evening. He discovered that she had canceled a library meeting, claiming she had forgotten about it. Sean was certain that Lauren hadn't forgotten her evening appointment because she had told him she was heading to the library when she left his room 2 hours earlier. Meanwhile, Lauren's family and friends were searching for her, unaware of the desperate situation unfolding at East Alabama Medical Center, where doctors were fighting to save her life. Lauren was brought to the hospital unconscious and without identification, so the doctors didn't know who she was. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to save her, and she was pronounced dead about an hour after admission. The autopsy revealed that she had died from a single bullet wound that had punctured both lungs. The shot had been fired from very close range, with the gun muzzle just inches from her skin. As police investigated the burned-out car on campus, whose owner was missing, they quickly pieced together the evidence and realized that the hospital's unidentified victim was Lauren Burke. On March 5, 2008, James Burke identified his daughter Lauren's body after traveling from Atlanta. The news of her death quickly spread throughout the Auburn University campus. As Lauren's loved ones mourned her loss, the police worked to uncover the circumstances surrounding her death, including the connection between her murder and the car fire. They also sought to determine whether other students were at risk. Investigators processed both the scene where Lauren's body was found and the area around her car for evidence. Auburn Police Captain Tom Stauffer stated that the department has dedicated all available resources to finding the person responsible for the crime, as the tight-knit student community of Auburn, Alabama, takes such incidents very seriously. The police are deeply invested in solving the case and will not rest until the perpetrator is caught. To aid in the investigation, Alabama Governor Bob Riley has offered a $10,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest. The burned-out car belonging to Lauren Burke was brought to the Auburn Police Department, where state forensic laboratory investigators and state fire chief's office officers examined the charred remains. Their search uncovered burned clothing fragments, a melted digital camera, and the car's owner's manual. A significant discovery was a .38 caliber bullet found under the front seat, suggesting that the car's interior may have been the crime scene and that the perpetrator had set the fire to destroy evidence. Investigations involved interviews with Lauren's family, friends, and boyfriend, but none could identify a suspect who had a motive to harm her. Prior to her death, Lauren had been at Ashan's dorm, so detectives searched his room but found nothing linking him to the crime. After talking to Michael, the person Lauren was supposed to meet at the library, detectives discovered that when Lauren answered his call, he heard a sound similar to a moving car in the background. This new information led them to investigate further, and they found that Lauren's bank card had been used multiple times shortly after she was found lying in the road. It seemed likely that the person using Lauren's bank card was involved in her incident, so the police started searching for them. However, the case took an unexpected turn soon after. Just 2 days after Lauren's death, on March 7, 2008, at 9:55 a.m., a similar attack occurred at a Walmart parking lot in Newnan, Georgia, about 75 miles from Auburn. A 72-year-old woman was assaulted by a man of African descent as she was getting into her car. The attacker hit her on the head, threatened her, and forced her to move to the passenger seat. He then got into the driver's seat and tried to drive away, but realized an eyewitness was following him and calling for help. The perpetrator, fearing the police would be called, returned to the Walmart parking lot where they had initially been spotted. They abandoned the stolen vehicle, got into a nearby silver Chrysler Sebring, and sped away. Several hours later, 4 officers began a high-speed chase to catch the fleeing Chrysler as it headed towards Columbus, West Georgia. The driver of the Chrysler refused to stop, putting other drivers at risk during the pursuit. Officers observed the driver throwing an object out of the window, which was later found to be a .38 caliber revolver. The chase continued until the Chrysler broke down, billowing smoke from under the hood. The driver stopped abruptly in the middle of the road and opened the door. A pursuing police officer on a motorcycle crashed into the open door, causing the officer to fly over the handlebars and fall to the ground. Fortunately, the officer was not seriously injured. The perpetrator then attempted to flee into the nearby woods, but was quickly caught by the police and taken into custody. Courtney Lockhart was born on October 20, 1984. According to his family, he was a pleasant and fun-loving person before enlisting in the U.S. Army. However, after serving in Iraq from 2004 to 2005, he returned as a changed person. His mother described Courtney as a cheerful individual, but after his return from Iraq, his behavior drastically changed. He stopped smiling, became paranoid about people standing behind him, and would often hide in closets or under the bed. In 2006, Lockhart's personal life took a toll when he had a daughter with his ex-girlfriend. The same year, he was court-martialed for assaulting fellow soldiers, using illegal substances, and abandoning his unit without permission. As a result, he spent 7 months in detention before being dishonorably discharged from the Army in December 2006. In the following years, Lockhart's life spiraled out of control. By 2008, he had become increasingly troubled, neglecting his personal hygiene, abandoning his responsibilities as a father, and developing a severe addiction to illegal substances. Between February 2008 and the time of his capture, Lockhart committed a series of burglaries using a consistent modus operandi. Courtney Lockhart targeted women, approaching them from behind in parking lots as they got into their cars. He would threaten them with a gun, demand their purses, and try to take their cars. Tragically, one of these crimes ended in the death of Lauren Burke. Lockhart's string of assaults came to an end on March 7, 2008, when he attacked a 72-year-old woman but failed to escape a police pursuit. After his arrest, Lockhart, then 23, confessed to the police that he was responsible for kidnapping and killing Lauren Burke. The police interrogation, which was recorded on video, became a crucial piece of evidence in the trial. Additionally, the police found Lauren's personal belongings, including her iPod and bank cards, in Lockhart's car. Lockhart provided a detailed account of the events leading up to Lauren's death. On Tuesday, March 4, 2008, he woke up in his silver Chrysler Sebring, which he had been sleeping in near the East Alabama Medical Center. Desperate for money, he drove around Auburn looking for another victim to target. It's notable that Lockhart exclusively targeted women, never men. He eventually ended up on the campus of Auburn University, where he parked near the student dorms and spent several hours watching students from his car. At 8 p.m., Lockhart saw a girl, who turned out to be Lauren, casually walk up to the car parked next to him and open the door. Without hesitation, Lockhart grabbed his revolver and approached Lauren from behind. He poked her with the gun muzzle and demanded to know how much money she had. When she didn't respond, he forced her into the front passenger seat and got behind the wheel himself. Lauren was initially silent, but then screamed in fear. Once she calmed down, she handed Lockhart $200 from her purse, begging him to leave. However, instead of leaving, Lockhart threatened her with a gun, ordering her to remove her clothes. Lauren complied, leaving on only a pair of socks. Lockhart's motivation for making her undress was his mistaken belief that she would be less likely to try to escape without clothes. Lockhart then drove around Auburn, holding Lauren at gunpoint with one hand while steering with the other. Lauren attempted to talk him out of his criminal actions, and when he claimed his life was over, she promised to help him find a job in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, her phone started ringing, and Lockhart instructed her to answer it and make up an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. Lauren was supposed to meet Michael at the library, but when he called to confirm, she claimed to have forgotten and quickly hung up. Later, Lockhart drove her through the city streets as she persistently begged him to release her, offering to help him overcome his personal struggles. As they drove down Highway 147, Lauren made a desperate attempt to escape by opening the car door and trying to jump out while the vehicle was still moving. In the ensuing chaos, Lockhart admitted to accidentally firing a shot, which tragically pierced both of Lauren's lungs, and she also sustained injuries from the fall. Lauren regained enough strength to wave at passing drivers, but soon lost consciousness. Lockhart, who had abducted her, parked his car outside a church and watched as people began to stop and assist Lauren. Realizing the police would soon arrive, he hastily left the scene, planning to destroy evidence he had left in his car. Lockhart drove to a gas station, where he used Lauren's bank card to buy a can of gasoline. He then doused the interior of his car with the gasoline, got back in, and drove to the campus where he had initially taken Lauren. His Chrysler was parked there. As he drove, Lockhart became lightheaded from the gasoline fumes, so he rolled down the windows to let in some fresh air. Once he arrived on campus, Lockhart stole $46, an iPod, and Lauren's bank cards from her car. He then set the car on fire and drove away in his Chrysler. At a gas station, Lockhart filled up his tank using Lauren's money, then returned to campus. However, investigators began to question Lockhart's story, suspecting that he had ulterior motives for making Lauren undress. They thought that Lockhart's goal was not to prevent her from escaping, but rather to exploit her in some way. When Lauren jumped out of the moving car, Lockhart's true intentions were foiled. The investigators were skeptical about Lockhart's claim that he accidentally shot Lauren. Given his military background and experience with guns, it seemed unlikely that he would accidentally discharge his weapon. Instead, it appeared that Lauren realized she was in grave danger and decided to escape by jumping out of the car, at which point Lockhart intentionally shot her. Forensic tests confirmed that the bullet found in Lauren's car was fired from the same gun Lockhart had abandoned during a police chase. Expert analysis also ruled out the possibility of an accidental shot. as the trigger required significant force to fire. On March 9th, investigators questioned Lockhart for the second time. The next day, he was officially charged with multiple crimes related to Lauren Burke's case. The trial started on November 8th, 2010. Lockhart's lawyers argued that their client suffered from a mental illness due to his military service, and that Lauren's shooting was accidental. According to court records, Lockhart pleaded not guilty, citing mental defect or insanity as the reason. Lauren was initially silent, but then screamed in fear. Once she calmed down, she handed Lockhart $200 from her purse, begging him to leave. However, instead of leaving, Lockhart threatened her with a gun, ordering her to remove her clothes. Lauren complied, leaving on only a pair of socks. Lockhart's motivation for making her undress was his mistaken belief that she would be less likely to try to escape without clothes. Lockhart then drove around Auburn, holding Lauren at gunpoint with one hand while steering with the other. Lauren attempted to talk him out of his criminal actions, and when he claimed his life was over, she promised to help him find a job in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, her phone started ringing, and Lockhart instructed her to answer it and make up an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. Lauren was supposed to meet Michael at the library, but when he called to confirm, she claimed to have forgotten and quickly hung up. Later, Lockhart drove her through the city streets as she persistently begged him to release her, offering to help him overcome his personal struggles. As they drove down Highway 147, Lauren made a desperate attempt to escape by opening the car door and trying to jump out while the vehicle was still moving. In the ensuing chaos, Lockhart admitted to accidentally firing a shot, which tragically pierced both of Lauren's lungs, and she also sustained injuries from the fall. Lauren regained enough strength to wave at passing drivers, but soon lost consciousness. Lockhart, who had abducted her, parked his car outside a church and watched as people began to stop and assist Lauren. Realizing the police